IP stuff, so that if they get a complaint, then they will actually take action. Because as soon as they begin like proactively looking for these like copyright things to enforce and then do that on their own, then that can be used as a legal argument against Twitch in the future in a larger, lawsuit, in order to say that, okay, Twitch, you have the capacity to do this. You've had a history of going after these, copyright infringements. Why didn't you do it for future X big case? Therefore, you can assign more culpability to Twitch. So they want to keep it passive, and they want to respond solely to DMCA requests and not go out proactively and do
Okay,
it for
so
their own.
nothing that any of y'all just said after April got through speaking had anything to do with her pushing back against the point that Twitch
That's
wasn't
me,
going to
April.
do something against fucking Safe Harbor, right? And everything that
Bro,
you
it's
guys
back.
pointed out had to do with algorithms and other fucking things that weren't being directly moderated by a Twitch mod as to why these things end up getting captured by the software that's capturing DMCA. So at this point, the only thing I know to fucking do is throw back to April because she's the only one that's got to have a fucking.
It wasn't an algorithm, CTV. It was
So
a manual
true.
DMCA request.
There's no algorithm.
Yeah,
on
I mean,
Twitch, so yeah, it doesn't.
You also have
I
to
think you're the one that's
understand
a
the
bit lost
difference
here,
between algorithmic versus like actively banning someone. Because if you're actively like choosing to send in moderators to ban someone or making a company decision to ban someone, that's going to put you at serious risk for losing your safe harbor protection. And it's different from
YouTube
having
fucked up.
an operating like background automated system.
Yeah, people don't know this, but YouTube fucked that up. I just wanted to point out like what Rose said. So a long time ago, YouTube took the initiative because they were pressured by some record labels and stuff to take the initiative to take down people. So that YouTube went out on their own and searched some up, and that was the beginning of like, I don't know if you guys remember, like 5 or 6 years ago, everything got DMCA'd. Everything that you could be breathing.
Apocalypse, right?
This is pre-Adpocalypse. This was like the very first.
Sorry.
Yeah, so this is like the first
2015.
copyright thing, and they would just take your video down. They would claim the whole thing, and YouTube like essentially had to talk themselves out of it. They had to develop like $100 million, scouting algorithm and all this stuff. And Twitch is just trying to avoid having to do anything that would cost them money. So
yeah, they want to maintain the passive thing as long as possible for their possible deniability.
Like Twitter has.
So I'm gonna throw it over to James because James has been trying to talk a few times.
Well, no, I mean a lot of the safe harbor protection. I'm glad that it got brought up because it's the largest reason why any of this happens. I mean, other people have mentioned it. I mean, DMCA.
I think you're right. I'm so bad with technical stuff.
Once somebody sends in,
it's really embarrassing.
Or SOL, that's how it goes. And again, I think a lot of the problem you have on the platform is that content creators, by and large, don't understand the difference between copyright, licensing, IP, active syndication, secondary syndication. Like literally people who are watching MasterChef. Like MasterChef is currently in production in 65 countries. It's syndicated in like 160. Like it's literally a franchise that does $2 billion a year in revenue. So to think that Twitch, which is Amazon, which is literally like the largest effing corporation on the face of the planet, is just gonna like just let it all go by. Like eventually one of their corporate partners is gonna tap them on the shoulder and go, playtime is over. Now you have to play like an adult because you're doing adult type numbers with your adorable little platform. And that's it. Just like that, the lights are gonna go out, like for all forms of content. To Scott's point, yeah, there are some bots, but again, a lot of those bots are passive, which is why you occasionally get a mute on a VOD, but you rarely get ripped down midstream.
Right. Yeah. I think I disagree with the fact that MasterChef. I think reality TV is one of the few you could probably get away with, and I think Fox knows for sure. Twitch is big enough to where Hassan, especially, is like the biggest MasterChef streamer. Or XQC has 100,000 viewers. There's no way Fox doesn't know. There's a hate watcher or something out there that sent it, that knows someone's uncle, whoever.
Yeah, they don't seem to care.
The thing with reality TV, though, especially like MasterChef, is that they don't have long shelf life. So you don't see Fox playing reruns of season 2 of MasterChef. And all these people do by playing older seasons is bring brand recognition that essentially boosts the thing. They understand what's going on, and they don't want to do anything. They don't want to do the preemptive strike because then they kind of set the precedent for other companies that are like, oh, what if I can convince the streamers to watch my, I don't know, fucking Home Improvement or whatever, and get people, or not Home Improvement, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it runs on profitability. Yeah,
exactly. It's all profit.
Okay, so up until a couple of years ago, I would have agreed with that point. And again, I worked in television for more than a decade, so like I know you worked in music.
You poor bastard.
It's the same thing. I know it was fucking horrible. I worked on like Toddlers and Tiaras. It was a nightmare, but I digress. Up until a few years ago, I know, it was the worst. So I would have agreed with you up until Hulu and Netflix got into the game and they started buying packages of entire seasons of old reality shows. Like every single year, the Great British Baking Show is on total viewed minutes by title in the top 10 of Netflix programs because they have season like 2 through season 9 on there. So when Hulu and Netflix compete to get the full Master Chef, it behooves them to have fewer iterances of the same episodes on multiple platforms when they're trying to exclusively buy the whole bundle.
With that being said, James, I want to ask you, because you agree with me in the intros, is that, hey, what do you want to see in patent reforms or IP reforms overall?
So I'm in an odd spot because I created content. Like I used to live stream like protests, and Fox News would rip my content and put it like live on the 10 p.m. broadcast, and I wouldn't get a cent because they knew I couldn't afford lawyers. So they would just rook my fucking content every day. I think you should have some form of copyright and quote ownership, but it needs to be a much shorter shelf life. Like this bullshit where shit goes 20, 40, 60 years, just making money ad nauseum. Like record labels haven't produced squat for content in decades. They don't sell CDs, tapes, or albums. But like Capitol Records still makes $500 million a year, and it's solely on licensing play for music that was recorded back in the 1970s. It's ridiculous. You need to have a much shorter shelf life on creative exclusivity.
So I largely agree with you here.
And question.
Let me finish up real quick. I largely agree with you here. And the thing that I've kind of like thrown out there that has gotten a lot of attention, particularly on my right-wing community, is that I want to reform patents to be more like a mandatory royalty system. We don't give you a standardized monopoly for having an IP, such as, music or, a video or
they can
even
see
a patent
me.
as far
I
as
just have it
property.
like,
but what you have to do is that if you are going to use
muted
that
on my
schematic
end, or
in a
like
production or that
end.
video in some kind of thing, there's some kind of mandatory royalty. Now, obviously,
you're talking about built-in licensing, like built-in percentage fee licensing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a method. It works in other fields.
Yeah, I want to do that like across the board. I think that would actually be I think that would be immensely gratifying, not only to the American capitalist, but the American consumer all in one shot, because it gets rid of one of the biggest problems with IPs, and that is a standardized monopoly, while also giving people diversity in opinions and thoughts and production. And so I think that's a win for everybody.
Tiberius, do you think this system might result in like less people being incentivized to develop new IP if they can just use other people?
There's always that kind of thought out there, but there's a question in what is reformative IP in the regards of, example, I'm going to use Spider-Man, right? I'm going to take that IP and I'm going to use it. Well, is my Peter Parker going to be what Marvel wants Peter Parker to be? I'll give you the Amazing Spider-Man series versus the MCU as an example. These are two different Peter Parkers. And well, the crazy thing is we might see two different film series as a result of this. Just because the IP has a standard does not necessarily mean that it can't diverge. And we've seen this with a lot of things, not only, particularly in personal creative IPs.
I mean, I think another problem is maybe just that, like,
real quick.
We've seen this on a lot of things.
One second,
real
quick.
quick.
Fabian was going to say something quick. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, just a quick question for James from the internet. It's my understanding that you're an anarchist, right? So this is all in the process towards eventually getting rid of IP, correct?
Yeah, that would be the best ultimate.
I just wanted to clarify that I'm not the only one here.
Can we talk about that, getting rid of IP and what a silly idea that is? Can we?
Yeah, you just can't go from 1 to 10. Like, you can't just accelerate that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that ultimately your goal would be to get rid of IP as well.
No, I'm talking about this specific instance. Yeah.
The socialist and the ANCAP in the same boat. Amazing. Also, okay, so before we get to that row, CTV wanted to say something, and I want to make sure we all get educated from CTV's opinions. CTV?
So, look, Tiberius, it's nice you're bringing up Peter Parker, right? We can sit here and talk about fucking Batman, too. We can sit here and talk about all kinds of characters. But what we're talking about here, right, is how Lego Batman is most obviously the fucking best Batman movie ever fucking made, right? And that's why it is that should not have any type of DMCA restriction. But, you can't be mad at him for wanting to make money, right?
Oh, my God.
So then whenever you got a streamer that sits here and just constantly restreams fucking Master Chef because, they can't fucking think of anything else to fucking say. Well, you got to expect that you're going to get your pee smacked.
Or
That's
other
just how it
people's
is.
debates.
What do you mean, or other people's debates? That's why you have conversations with
Well,
the other
then
content
we have
creators ahead of time,
transformative thing that comes into there as
I
well. If you're not
actually
just
like
watching
it.
You're
I actually
critiquing
like it when people watch my content, like my stuff that I do on Twitch. But I think that that's because Twitch kind of relies on us sharing each other's content, and we grow through sharing each other's content. I think it is fair that when it's a YouTuber's content, that you make sure that they're okay with it, or if it's like copyrighted content, you just don't do it, right? I don't know. That's my opinion on that.
I don't know.
Once
I
again, like the
kinda think
enforcement is
that,
going to
like,
stem on.
there's definitely a line between, like, you're having mainstream created content like MasterChef or a blockbuster fucking movie or something else like that, or you have other content creators, regardless of what their following is, that are only active on YouTube, Twitch, or other social media platforms, right? There should pretty much be like an open policy between the smaller creators for sure, right? Just so you get fucking free advertising, if fucking nothing else. You know what I mean? Because ain't nobody else got to take the time to watch your shit, right? If they don't fucking want to. So if they're taking the time to watch it, fucking be thankful. Now,
Oh no! I saw Dylan make a call like a minute ago, and now CTV's gone. What is this? Hello?
Dylan Burns strikes again.
You got Dylan Dost.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
True.
Oh,
Guys, we gotta keep an eye on Dylan. Whenever he puts his phone up, something's about to happen. Okay, just hold on.
Yeah, it froze for a bit. Yeah.
Oh wow, that didn't happen.
Dylan did a cyber crime.
It's
again.
You know what? Look. That's why I've got the anti-movers and shakers happening on that end, I guess, right? So anyway, look, blockbuster movies, that kind of upper creative content. Like, look, I think there's a fucking conversation around limiting these things to say like 10, 15 years. But I don't think that 75 years or whatever the fucking current standard is now for this kind of thing needs to be the standard, especially considering, one, with where we are as a species and technology, two, the amount of content that's being created, and three, how fast, right, the market is moving as far as content creation is concerned. I feel like that, like, after 10, 15 years, if your shit is still relevant enough for people to still want to play, then you should, in fact, be in that other fucking category with everybody else. It's like, thank you for still playing my shit after 10, 15 fucking years. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Rose?
I think that the three.
I mean, another problem is that there's an externality introduced here.
Wait, I said Rose.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Rose. I thought you said Russ. We don't have a Russ on our panel. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I mean, there's three basic things that are good for the IP law, right? It's number one, it should always be in the hands of the copyright holder, whether or not they want to enforce it or not, and that's obviously going to be a subjective value judgment that goes in depending on whether or not they believe that the use of their content is going to be profitable for them at the end of the day, because market economies. Then secondly, there should probably be some degree of time sensitivity, and then thirdly, some degree of financial compensation, whether that be just like a flat royalty into perpetuity past a certain period of time, or it be something that we might see and that we talk about more when it comes to medical patents, where it's like makes up for a portion of the cost going into that, or like an X amount of the cost going into producing that piece of content. Those are all interesting ideas. But what I really want to talk about is I really want to talk to the two people who talked about wanting to abolish IP laws. So I want to ask an open question to any one of them. Why do you want to get rid of IP laws? What are you trying to accomplish with that?
In general, IP laws tend to constrict, constrain, and hold back the rate of advancement overall in industries. Far too often, all you have to do to create your own monopoly is by squatting on one good piece of IP. You come up with the next energy consumption, whatever. Well, it doesn't matter. Eventually, some large corporation will buy your patent because somebody on your board of directors will agree to sell their stock for a ludicrous amount of money. And before you know it, your company is acquired, your technology patent becomes part of that acquisition, and then it gets shelved in a basement in a room called shit that really would have helped us.
Like the other side of this.
AT&T was super
I think what you said there.
I'll write your name down.
Yeah, when it comes to that, I think that bad IP law can most certainly do that. But I also think that like non-existing IP law can also very much stifle innovation to a very high degree. So while having super like elongated and really sturdy and hyper stiff IP law can lead to exactly the things you're talking about, I think having more of a middle ground where there is some guarantee that, hey, you just spent a fuck ton of money into like researching or producing a given thing and you're ready to finally go to market with it, that it won't just be ripped from you right away and somebody else can produce it. Because at the end of the day, you put in a lot of resources in order to produce that thing in the first place. And if you don't have any guarantee that you putting in all those costs in the first place is going to be guaranteed to be reciprocated to some extent in the future, then it's obviously going to vastly decrease the will for people to make that initial investment in resources in order to be able to produce the thing in the first place.
Not only that, but one of the roles of the government, like if something is hugely beneficial to the public, the government can buy access to that thing cheaply. So that's another system that you can have copyright law, which incentivizes production of new intellectual property, and a public sector that is able to buy out and provide something for people.
Okay, Carter.
I'll jump in here and go back during the. I'm sorry, Carter waved on, so I took it up.
I was eating. You're good. Just go ahead. I'll go after you.
Appreciate it. Excuse me. Anyway, I want to jump in and just say that back during the late 1700s, early 1800s, before we really had copyright law, there was a level where everything kind of went stagnant for a quick minute. It's largely when we see Western democracies take on IP laws that we see dramatic transformations in the rate of innovation. So I'm definitely going to back up Rose on this, and that like getting rid of this wholesale, it seems like a terrible idea for me. What I do raise serious concerns with is, number one, the length of how long some of these IPs last. Copyright law, is what CTV said for Mickey Mouse, is 95 years right now. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, what the hell? All right, so
yeah, Disney's the worst. Don't mess with the mouse.
Yeah. So anyway,
I have a Donald Duck mug. I might get messed up from that in the future if I bring from.
Is it this year or next year that Mickey Mouse actually goes open source?
It'll be 50 years. Don't worry. They're gonna lobby it faster than you've ever seen. Okay.
Well, the good news is the last 3 times that they actually tried to lobby to get it done, they didn't get it off the. So it's gonna be this year, or we actually see the House of Mouse lose Mickey. So that'll be interesting. But the other side of this is that just having nothing in there seems like a terrible idea. It's just like, what is? I mean, it's not like we can't invent, but we're going to invent at way slower when people can't reap any kind of reward for the investments that they make, because it literally just becomes an open source. And that, like, R&D's a bitch. Look at pharmaceutical companies.
And that scales more and more depending on how big the initial investment is. So really big stuff as well is going to suffer the most, obviously.
Rose had asked people want to. So I want to get rid of IP law. And the reason being that I disagree. I think it doesn't matter. You don't need capital incentive to innovate. Like humanity, art, everything innovates no matter what. Also, the reason I want to abolish it is because nothing is original. I'm sorry. If you think you've made something original, you're lying. You've never made anything original in your life. No one has. Except for the cavemen who originally came up with a drum beat or whatever. Everything is derivative. There's not a piece of music that you listen to unless it's like randomly generated, like analog. You have like a modular synth or whatever. Maybe then you're making something, but that's still... someone had the idea to arrange it that way and you probably were inspired, or the way you use colors or artists are all inspired by someone else. Like, where does the line stop, right? And so eventually you get to it's all subjective. So I just say get rid of it and give, like, there's been ideas, right? An idea is to give, this is an IP law that I do agree with, is called master rights, which means you could sell the rights to all your stuff. You could draw a painting, but you have final say over where it gets to go, but you may not reward, get all of the benefit or whatever, which kind of exists, but not to the sense that I would want. It's really kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, but just because
I want to actually answer the question.
Rose, I think you get to finish, and then we'll throw it over to Andrew.
Yeah, so
Scott, sorry.
Yeah, so just because it's like subjective when it comes to where we draw the line exactly, and obviously derivation and inspiration is going to play a big part in the creation of anything really, you're leaning on existing technologies or whatever, we still need to place like a subjective line between different types of products and services and be like, hey, this is significantly different to the point where it can be its own IP. And functionally, the reason why we do it and the way we need to draw like a kind of like a, what's it called? A subjective statement there and a subjective distinction there is because IP laws and copyright laws are valuable to some extent. You do say that, oh, people will innovate no matter what. Yeah, sure, 100%. But how many companies are you going to see spend millions and millions and millions in order to try to innovate something new, or maybe like a new drug or whatever, when they know that, hey, anyone else can just literally yoink the recipe as soon as you're done with it and just put it on the market as well? You're going to see a massive, massive, massive decrease and massive push down on the ability for people to make big innovations, especially, especially when it comes to very, like heavy projects. So just because like the lines we draw is subjective, as is the case with a lot of things that we have in society as a whole, as long as we all agree on those subjective distinctions, and as long as they can be practiced to success in a court of law, then they are functionally useful in order to be able to achieve the desired goals of any one given law.
Hold on.
Okay, no, hold on. No,
Okay.
you've already gotten a chance to answer the question.
I think
I'm against IP here
place.
too.
Go for it.
Yeah. So here's the thing: we can engage in all of this like consequences of what will a world look like if we don't have IP. What will it look like with IP? What will it look like with different IP laws, et cetera, et cetera? My answer to your question is that IP laws are unethical by their very basis. They are morally wrong, and that's is as simple as that. The fact of the matter is that you can have transformational labor that creates private property from the idea of self-ownership, but the idea that you own an idea because someone put in some intellectual thought into creating an idea, and then those people get to gatekeep ideas, there's no ethical basis for this. The only reason people do this is because they think that the power of the state and that the capitalist fucking at the upper echelons that are using regulatory capture have a means of being able to use these laws as a means of protecting their own content. And it doesn't matter what type of reform you put in, it's always going to end up fucking over little people and having some form of regulatory capture for large corporations. It's always going to be this system where, some like we could look at the COVID vaccine, for example. There are plenty of countries, right, that have the capacity and the means to create the vaccine, and yet they're not being given the formula, they're not being given the information, and instead Pfizer is fucking leveraging companies' military installations and national banks so that they can sell them fucking the product that they have the ability to make themselves. IP laws are used in so many terrible ways, but just getting rid of all of the consequences, the fact of the matter is there's no ethical basis for IP law.
Okay, so you said there was...
That's absurd. The ethical basis is that you own what you create.
Stop. Okay. So we're going to go Rose, then we're going to go Taft, then we're going to go CTV, then Tiberius. If you say something that needs to be responded, okay, then Star. Okay, we're just all raising our hands at the same time because we love the moderator so much. So, if you say something that somebody wants to respond to, they can, but we're just going in that general order. Okay. So Rose, you're first.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to the thing you described with Pfizer, what you're describing there is not something that is intrinsic to the functioning of an IP or like a copyright law. That can be reformed out of it. So I'm going to focus more on your primary thing that you talk about, which is you talked about it being like necessarily immoral or necessarily unethical. Now, I would say that it has like a really, really strong functional purpose in our society, and that kind of gives the justifications for it. So in order to kind of get to that point, I'm just going to ask you like a really simple question. So pandemic happens again, okay? Or maybe we'll think about something else. Yeah, some drug. There is a potential for the creation of some drug that's going to have really strong and important effects for the medical industry as a whole, and for curing people of certain diseases or ailments or whatever as a whole. Now, we don't know how to get there exactly. We have some broad pointer society with the state that our current medical chemistry is at.
Legend to make it easy.
So we have like broadly pointers, so to say, as for where we want to go. But in your society, without copyright laws, how will any one entity decide to step up and like, okay, I'm going to dump millions or maybe billions of dollars into this project, and I have no idea if I'm actually going to be able to reap any profits from that, or if it's all just going to be siphoned off as soon as I create it by people who are just going to not spend any cost on R&D and just focus on production.
Yeah, so I like how you preface this with, I'm going to ask you a really simple question, and then you asked a question that you could literally write like entire like
I can simplify it if you want to.
And books on. But yeah, so
this is a basic question, right? You need this for your idea. You need this for your idea. If you're going to say we got to get rid of IP laws, then having like a basic question is like, okay, how do you finance like a big project is a pretty basic question.
Well, I mean, no, I said it's immoral, so I can just say that it's immoral and leave it at that. But I will engage in your utilitarian calculus here, right? Even though that's not my ethical position. And what I'll simply say is this: we have hundreds of millions of dollars that is spent on charities for cancer research, for example. So that's a portion of it. Another portion is that you can use contracts. Another portion is that IP law disincentivizes drugs that actually cure, because curatives go first to market and have a much better, much more likely to be profitable. Whereas with intellectual property, you can make things that like require people to be on them their entire life.
When you say contracts, what do you mean by contracts?
So you're getting really deep into the weeds here, right?
This is super basic.
Let's say I'm in. No, it's not. You're stop lying.
Okay, my bad.
When let's say you are a research and development pharmaceutical company, right? Not necessarily a manufacturer, right? You could engage with contracts with other large manufacturing companies, right? That you're going to create a pseudo system of IP from the major players in the market, and by doing so, you promise to give them advantages in going first to market, right? So it's a voluntary contract between two parties saying, look, I'll let you know what we're working on. I'll let you know as soon as we're ready. I'll let you know what chemicals you need to have available, et cetera, right? Again, when you're talking about a disease, there's things that people can take to reduce symptoms, and then there are also curatives. And a system like this would absolutely incentivize curatives, because the most profit would be made in being first to market, right? So I would actually argue that even if we get less innovation technically, it's still immoral. And also, I don't think that you can make that assumption just because you have a status quo that you're arguing for, and you're saying without this, the whole world will crumble. I just don't see that necessarily.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. So basically what I got from here is you're gonna reconstruct IP laws, but in a really roundabout way that also incentivizes the creation and the maintenance of monopolies, which I'm not a big fan of. That's basically what
I'm talking about.
I've been speaking for a very long, so I'm gonna give it to Tef.
Yeah, you're trying to give it to someone else while attacking me. So fuck off with that.
You want to ask me a direct question? Go for it.
I'm saying no. What I'm saying is that voluntary contracts between individuals, right, is very different than the state giving the intellectual property rights to an entity that now owns something and can choose what can be done with an idea, which is not a material scarce product, and it stifles innovation by definition.
So when I asked you about what the contracts look like, you literally use the exact words. You create a pseudo IP law system. So you basically reconstruct that entire thing, but without a centralized agency.
Right.
And
classic
what you talked about is you talked
argumentation,
about
by the way.
Between different types of companies. You talked about R&D.
Anarcho-capitalists.
Which sounds to me like, hey, this is just going to lend itself towards monopolies. Because you're right. If you have a monopoly within the medical industry, then technically, hey, a monopoly can just produce something. And because there's no other competitors in the industry, there's no one else with the capital, there's nobody else with the resources, there's no one else with the labor.
Every time.
Then you basically have like a pseudo IP law. So, I'll give it to that. You solve the IP laws by just having monopolies.
If socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists, right?
Well, I'm not a socialist, so that was a nice zinger, but completely.
Okay, not all.
Anyways, moving forward. Again, you're triggered by a word and not actually paying attention to what the concept is and what we're actually talking about. Because by doing this, by having large companies, you can't actually create a monopoly. See, IP laws create a monopoly. The lack of IP laws and voluntary contracts can create a monopsony, a majority of the market share, sure, but that doesn't stop competitors from being able to come in and manufacture better, more effective, cheaper products. So what you're saying is just definitionally false.
Okay,
I mean,
so
I think
when you talked about, go for it.
I mean, I think fundamentally there's just a mismatch in sort of understanding exactly what Scott is making an argument on. Because I think, Rose Rest, you're pointing out a really good thing, which is that the consequences of having IP laws has resulted in all of these positive effects in society, right? So you're making this sort of consequentialist argument. But F.L. Scott's not really looking at it from a consequentialist framework. I think they're saying that, like, IP law categorically is just something that shouldn't exist or is wrong. And I think it's a little bit like how Ayn Rand, she would say that, like, even if communism or some system of like socialist government could create better outcomes proven in some scenario, she would say that's still wrong because it's immorally demanding that people help, their fellow man and not just do whatever they please, right? Whatever they believe is best for themselves. And so I think there's this sort of like ethical mismatch here. But if I can speak to F.L. Scott and try to meet you maybe on the same level morally, I would say that man has a right to own what he creates, and man can create intellectual property and therefore ought to be able to own his intellectual property. And so a system that allows for that ownership is morally righteous in that sense. And I
I
think
disagree.
being
I
able
disagree,
to
but
own
I
a
love you actually
character.
understood the philosophy.
Yeah, I'm glad
I'll
you
give
can
you props
appreciate
for
it.
actually understanding the argument here, but I just disagree that you can apply that to intellectual property.
Okay,
I don't
fair
think
enough.
that's
I'm
transformational
literally gonna-
labor
I
of,
don't see
of
how
something.
it couldn't be applied to intellectual
Okay,
property,
CTV, you're
considering.
next.
Because you don't understand the philosophy behind it.
Oh yeah, you're right. I don't understand the philosophy. Look,
It's
the
boring nerd
reality
shit
here
to
is,
you.
Fabian, it's you're boring nerd shit, right? The fact of the matter is that when somebody comes up with an idea that nobody else has ever came up before, and they create some original content, that they do in fact, right, have a right to own the content that they created for a given time. To me, really, the conversation comes down to the length of time that they can maintain ownership of it, considering that their initial idea is no doubt going to spark innovation, creativity, and a fucking drive in other people to want to create similar content, perhaps adjacent to that, which goes back to what Carter was saying. Although, like, Carter, I got to be honest, at some point, somebody did have original ideas about certain things. So
Thank
that's
you.
Right.
kind of like the
Man,
derivative
I'm
of
glad
the
you
first
appreciate
part,
it.
Let's
right?
bring it back. Let's start paying them out, their families.
Yeah,
I'm just
so-
saying, you're guilty of it with wacky, wavy, inflatable, flailing arm 2 man, right?
Yeah,
so
the
your
fact of the
intro
matter is
defeats your own argument.
I didn't say that I was Al Harrington. I said I was CTV, and I've got a fucking stock over here. You want some? Come get some. I don't know what
Sounds
to tell you,
derivative,
baby.
bro.
No,
Actually-
you're actually the derivative that's not making any fucking sense right now. Everybody else in the room is like, yeah, there should be some kind
Whatever,
of
wacky,
ownership
wavy,
to these
inflatable,
fucking
flaming
things, but
arm
you're
2 man.
saying there shouldn't be any kind of ownership to these things, is where it's falling
Well,
apart. So
I kind
I
of
don't
agree
know
with
where we need to
Fabian.
go from here, but the fact of the matter is that the only fucking person worried about bringing content to the audience right now is CTV, and the rest of you need to get your motherfucking meme games up.
Okay, so we're gonna go Star, Ty, then Carter, or unless Carter has something pertinent to say specifically.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
CTV.
So it's to
Okay.
Fabian. I didn't think I would agree with him, but like I kind of do. So the problem with IP laws is it will always benefit.
Wait, it was to Fabian, not to CTV.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what?
Well, yeah.
Okay,
Well,
so-
Wait,
Fabian
it
had
was
said
it was Star
something.
first, I think, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
hello.
Go ahead.
I haven't
Yeah,
spoken for like
Let
30
the man
minutes.
praise me,
Unbelievable,
Dylan.
Dylan.
Let him
Holy
praise me.
shit.
Look, I just want to say, Carter, I condemn you for coming on my panel and speaking over POC voices. I find
Of course.
that,
Of course.
Yeah.
terrible. Of course. Star, you can go on.
He's
You're
actually a
amazing.
calico, so that doesn't count.
Oh my god, dude. Okay. So what I was just gonna say, I think it's very ironic. There are streamers who like read philosophy books on stream, right? Is that not copyright infringement of some sort, right? Anyways, I understand.
So, that's
I
not how that
understand
works.
Scott
I'm glad
and
you watched my
Carter's
content.
points. I understand Scott and Carter's point that what is original is complicated, right? I understand where they're coming from, because even if you look at visual art, right, everything is abstracted from something else. And if you look at like the most base level of that, an artist will find something in nature, like a flower or a leaf or a pattern or something, and they'll recreate it in a different medium, and then they'll recreate it again, and then they'll keep recreating it until it's like completely unrecognizable from the original thing that they were inspired by. And you see that in art and design all the time, and you can see the similarities in music even. So I definitely understand that. However, what I would say is that it's not the fact that it's abstracted from something else that makes IP somehow meaningless. I would say that it is the labor that goes into recreating and recreating and recreating until it's completely unrecognizable, until it's this new original piece of work that's what needs to be protected, because that is the work that goes into it. You are essentially protecting the labor that this person has put into it.
Okay, next is Tiberius, then Carter.
Yeah, so I've got a few things here, but I'll make it short and simple. I think between FLS and Rose is that they've actually shown the double-edged sword of IP and what it can be. I'm definitely with Rose in the fact that I don't think you're going to see near the amount of innovation without it. Now, Carter actually hit me with we're still going to have innovation. Absolutely agree with you on that, but I think it's going to be tremendously slower. I bet we'd lose about 80% of our innovation on a yearly basis. The originality thing, I'm not even going to go down with you on. That's fucking weird. But what I do want to get into is that FLS hit something that I agree with the NCAP crew with a lot that people I don't think appreciate, and that is IP is a massive reason why we have regulatory capture. It is probably one of the leading causes of why monopolies form. And so when people actually don't regard that in any kind of way, it actually makes me lose my brain a little bit. But Scott, you got to explain to me how physical property rights do not translate into intellectual property. Like, what is the moral difference there? Why are you not equating? I'm done.
I go out into the woods. I chop down a tree. I turn the tree into lumber. I turn the lumber into a chair. If you tax me on this or you take it from me, you cannot stop. You cannot separate my labor from the chair in and of itself. The same is not true for something that has no scarcity, that has no material.
Wrong.
Okay, Carter, do you want CTV to respond first to that and explain why that's
No,
wrong?
yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay, CTV.
Yeah, so I eat the motherfucking deer that I went out and fucking hunted, right? That deer is now transformed into energy that my body can then use, right? That energy that is being used to formulate the idea that I now have. That energy that I have left over from formulating that idea now gets put into fucking work to create this fucking idea. In by way of video media, motherfucking audio media, whatever the fucking media is, right? Now I have a tangible product in order for me to put out there to everybody, right? The fucking media got created from an intellectual fucking standpoint and then physicalized in the virtual world. There is no reason at all for you to think that the fucking tree that you chop down and turn to a house is any different in this moral equation to the fucking media that I created in the virtual world, the internet, and they put out for everybody.
CTV.
Well,
Wait. Quick question. Did you eat? Shut up. Did you eat the deer raw though?
Of course not.
Okay.
So
It's an important question.
Obviously, you're just here to simp for Pokemon, because what you really want to do is you want to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood on your stream uninterrupted, and that's really what's going on here, right?
To begin with, then maybe it would be a meme, but the fact that I don't, that lets me know that 90% of the audience doesn't, and it's such a niche thing.
No,
CTV,
you not knowing is the meme. You not knowing is the meme.
That's the meme.
I'm with CTV on this one. What the fuck is this? Full Metal Alchemist?
Carter, do you know that show?
Wait, Rose,
Yeah,
you've got to be shitting me right now.
I'm not. I'm being 100% serious.
Okay,
You know I'm
get
being
out.
serious when I say I
Get
said
out.
CTV. That's when you know, okay? That's when you know.
Pause. CTV, you're now in the same boat as the European.
Based.
Here we go, CTV. We got to team up. We got to get back.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no. Somebody's got to
knows
save the
better.
Europeans every once in a while. Hits World War I and II. Okay.
I think this is unfortunately, by the way, the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is the better one. I mean, the first one kind of sucked; it fell off towards the end. I think this is something that can't be answered because, like, I agree with, surprisingly, with what Scott said or Fabian, is that you can't have IP and you can't have markets, because if IP exists with markets, it'll always favor those who have more money, and you lead the monopoly. No matter what, it will always be like that. And I guess that's why I believe in things, because obviously I'm speaking towards a utopia that I never think will exist. But if I had utopia, it would be no IP law, because there would be no incentive. They would grow. And I disagree with Rose and Tiberius, that both of them said that you would stifle innovation. But I think that there's plenty of people out there who do things purely out of wanting to do them. And if you make things not protected and or put them out of reach because of a lack of capital or whatever, you have more people who might grab that patent or that idea and run with it and go further. By protecting it or putting a price tag on it, you've now put it out of reach of a lot of people when the majority of the world is in poverty.
Do you think that there's a lot of people who do it not out of the good
Can I
of their
just
heart, but
point
because
out
of a
one
profit
thing?
incentive?
I gotta point out one thing.
This is the problem with consequentialist ethics.
But
Right?
I want to be
You're
pointed
engaging-
out of
You're
one
engaging-
thing.
you're
I want to be
engaging-
pointed
Yes,
out
one
of
thing.
Wait,
One
stop.
thing.
We don't. Okay, we don't moderate for Dylan, but I will let Star go, then Fabian, in that order.
I
Thank
was also
you.
called out.
Okay.
I gotta-
I would
I
just
was
like to say,
I was called
excuse
out.
me,
Okay.
I will not be mansplained. Okay. Can we just okay, Rose wrist. Okay, I know we're supposed to be on the same side here, but Rose wrist, I will not let you mansplain me. Okay. Secondly, can we just acknowledge that there was real-time IP theft going on here? Real-time IP theft. Real time. I'm just saying.
How long are you gonna drag this meme out, girl?
It's not even an accurate
So anyways,
meme.
this is the problem. This is the problem with
This is
engaging in
being
this
thefted from me.
utilitarian calculus, right?
Before my eyes.
No.
Before my eyes.
We don't have time to
Okay,
get into
okay,
ethics. We don't have
okay.
time to get into ethics. Okay, hold on.
This
I
is-
was called out though on like
no,
a specific
no,
point.
Wait,
about
wait,
stifling
okay.
innovation.
Right. The problem is we're both engaging in this argument about whether or not IP will have more or less innovation, right? And the fact of the matter is that you're dealing with a possible future with probability, and nobody knows the answer to that, right? Like there are plenty of historical examples of how IP laws have been used to disenfranchise people, how they've been used to fuck over other countries, massively slow down Kuznets curve, as well as disenfranchise small inventors and small people. We could look at AT&T when America made it a corporation that was owned by the state and nationalized it, and then after they became a private corporation again, they spent decades buying up IP things to maintain their monopoly. Right? We can use all of those, and then of course we can use all of the things of like, hey, IP allows pharmaceutical innovation and things of that nature, and allows people to put hundreds of millions of dollars into research and development because they know that once they have something, they can hold on to it for years. The problem with engaging in that calculus is we don't know the answer, and there are good arguments for and against, and so you have to go back to the ethics of whether or not it is right or wrong, and that is where you have to actually formulate your decision on that.
Okay, so I have to say a few things on this. So when it comes to stifling innovation, this is like incredibly obvious. So while I agree that there are absolutely people that do things and that they create things like purely out of the good of their heart or some deep-seated passion that they have towards the project, 100% plenty of those people exist. They create amazing, beautiful things that are really, really valuable. We still need to recognize that, hey, there are other forms of incentives that also produce things that are valuable to us as a society, and the financial incentive is one of those things that drive people towards things. Now, it's not the only thing, I'm not saying it's the most important thing or anything, but fundamentally, if you're trying to reach a goal and you strip away at incentives, you're going to have less people reaching the goal no matter what on the aggregate. Like, it's not like you're going to strip away financial and then the amount of people that suddenly develop like a deep-seated passion for this is just going to engulf the entirety of what previously was the group of people that were financially motivated by it. Now, I also want to say then, most of the things that have been pointed out as like issues with IP laws, most of them can be reformed out of it, 100%. Now, obviously, within an economy that has markets and has capital, there's still going to be advantages that are going to be given to the people with the greatest amount of capital. But nevertheless, I think that that's still something we need to strive towards, because I sincerely do not see how we will be able to like obtain the same amount of innovation, but also the same amount of security and big investments otherwise. So I pose a very, very simple question, okay? If somebody develops like a product or like an app or whatever, or like a medicine for like $700 million, at what point is this person going to be secure when going out in the market, and at what point can people just start ripping them off? Because if they can do it immediately, then that person just $700 million is going to be just in the gutter. There's literally no purpose for him to do that.
4 years of charity for cancer alone in America, number one, and number two.
I didn't hear you. I genuinely didn't hear you.
That's literally only like 4 years of American charities for cancer, right? So developing a drug with $700 million would literally only take 4 years of just
maybe it would be good if we had like a big
Number
central
two,
body that could allocate funding in a society based on like need.
Gross, that's crazy.
Number two, your inability to be
Okay.
Number two, your inability to be creative enough to imagine how the market might be able to provide these solutions is not an answer to just dunk on whether or not we need IP laws. You just engaged in the exact same argument that I made, reframed it, and then restated your argument. It's silly.
It's just a matter of incentive.
Once again, I asked you the question. So
Says
that
the guy
person that just made a $700 million investment.
Stealing philosophy.
I mean,
FLS,
the question is really about like,
God
payment.
damn it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Somebody
FLS,
just spent $700 million creating a product. Why would they ever do that if that can just be ripped from
I've
them as
already
soon as they want
answered
to
this,
put it to
but
market?
you just apparently can't.
I think we should let
answer it
Tiberius
again.
go.
I'm sorry.
I
And then
don't
I'll
think
go
we
after
need
it.
to disregard everything that Scott says.
Let's
Everything.
stop for a second. Okay, Tiberius is next on the list. So we're gonna
Yeah, simple question. FLS, do you really want to turn the entirety of the investment scheme of most societies into literally a knockdown version of GoFundMe? Because that's literally what I'm getting out of this.
I mean, you can create a meme and then make it seem like a question, but my answer to that is no.
Okay, so walk me through this, because I like on a level here that seems like exactly what we're gonna get is that if you don't have any kind of IP where you're like, hey, you know, somebody, whether it's through contract law, IP laws, enforcement law, that they can actually say, hey, you owe me at least something for this. I think you're just gonna bleed people out of innovation.
So I'll give you an example. I'll give you one example, right? We'll use a little bit of creativity here, right? Which Rose.
Yeah, let's go.
So let's say I'm a small time inventor and I invent some type of toy, right? So now we have a completely free, unregulated market. We have a completely free market, and we handle IP via contracts if we so choose. So I'm a small inventor, and I can make a toy. Now, if I just make this toy and make it widely available to everybody, I will have spent hours and hours and hours trying to make this new toy, right? And then some other company is going to rip it off and immediately start manufacturing this toy. Or I could go to a company that says, hey, we have non-disclosure agreements. You have an idea, come to us, we'll check it out. And then you sign the non-NDA, they check it out, they go, oh, this is a great idea. We're going to hook you up with Hasbro. And then you go to Hasbro and they sign an NDA. And then Hasbro goes, that's a great idea. We've already signed an NDA. We're willing to pay you this amount of money for your idea. They purchase your idea. The inventor makes money. Hasbro makes money because they have a toy that comes first.
And then another toy company just steals it.
No, it's not even that.
Shut
the fuck up, man. God damn it.
The only way that works is there's some kind of law ahead of time to protect the product in order for them to sell it. That's the point.
Actually, one, true. Two, and more importantly, is that if you're literally everyone's just going to Hasbro, you literally are just fast tracking the monopolization at that.
You're just making a monopoly, exactly. That's what I was saying.
It doesn't have to be
restricting.
Stop.
Capitalism. Either is a monopoly, and that's how it works, or there's not a monopoly, and then they steal it from Hasbro.
Oh, you don't even know what a monopoly.
Okay, Stardust.
Yes. Okay. I think that we should disregard everything that Scott says from this point forward, because all he does is steal IP. He just reads philosophy of other people. I demand you make your own ideas, Scott. I demand you make your own ideas, okay? Make your own ideas, and you know what? While you're at it, make your own words too, Scott. Make your own words, because you're stealing the IP of everybody else who made the English language.
Stop, Fabian. It seems that James wants to defend you here. Okay.
Oh, no, I was attacked real quick. I'll be real quick with you.
Oh God, it's never quick.
Last night, real quick. Last night I had a debate on the Crucible. Great debate. You should check it out. And I was accused of the same thing. And then I returned with my own philosophical argument that I know no one has done, because I actually had to look up Twitch TOS to see if I was even allowed to say this. And what I said is there are some forms of slavery that are good, and there are some that are bad. And just like the slavery picking cotton out in the fields, he looks at the house Negro and says, I want that position. And I call this the house Negro argument, because I would rather be a free man than a house Negro. That is my own.
You know what, Scott?
So you know what? That's all me.
I'm proud of you, but I was here first doing the advocating for child labor, okay? Some children are too lazy, and they need to get back to work, okay? So you can't impress me with your, some slavery is good, okay? Some children need to get back to fucking work. Okay, and if it's the school to prison pipeline, take the school out of it. Just send them to prison or send them to work. I don't care.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be very clear, okay? Moving forward, Fabian, okay? If you want to say that theory somewhere else, you can do that. But we're just not gonna say.
I looked it up.
I know that you looked it up, but I just am not comfortable with it. So
it was intrinsic. It was necessary for the discussion of IP laws to drop.
Read the room, man. What are you running at?
Everybody, shut up. We're just gonna throw it over to James now. Okay, we're having a good time.
Please, just because it's literally like ripping my soul apart. Reading philosophy and educating people is not a violation of copyright or intellectual property. It's fair use under the usage of dissemination and education.
I bet you steal IP, philosophy IP.
Maybe.
There is no philosophy IP. It's educational.
If you're reading it in an educational way, yes.
If you published a book, then
if you're just reading it word for word, it is definitely not fair use.
Right. If you are disseminating it for educational purposes.
No, if you're teaching a class on it, then it's educational.
No, I read books that are written before 1927 that all of the authors have been dead. Right.
Well,
these are the only things that I read, and then we go chapter or we go sections, and then we discuss the sections and disseminate information. That's
dissemination for purpose of education.
That sounds reasonable.
Now I understand why I don't watch your streams. They're so fucking boring. Okay, now we're gonna go into outros. Okay, we're gonna start with.
We know you don't have a philosophical education.
And that's why I'm not boring. And that's why I'm going to throw up to Carter in top left-hand corner.
I just think there's no answer to this. IP laws are just impossible. But I do agree with somehow with Scott here that any IP law that we have is going to lead to bad circumstances. We're going to see whatever we have now is just going to get worse and worse and worse. The only way is to tear it down. I don't think there's any solution.
Okay, now we're going to throw it over to CTV.
Yeah, I think that changes some of the restrictions, the amount of time that you have IP. Like I said earlier, I think from last I looked at it, depending on what it is, it's 75 years. I think 10 to 15 years is kind of like that sweet spot, considering how fast everything's moving. Especially considering the fact that now I'm seeing a fucking Ghostbusters remake from the movie that I saw as a kid that absolutely fucking sucked. Right? So, like if your content's still relevant 10 to 15 years from now in the 21st century, right? To take a real 21st century look at this thing instead of like a 20th century fucking look, right? In the 21st century, if your shit's still relevant 10 to 15 years from now, you should probably just be saying thank you that anybody's bothering to fucking look at it, considering the amount of content creators that are actually out there and how the internet and computer technology has really freed up individuals to be able to create their own content. So that's where I'm at with it. I think we need to be taking a real look at IP law and lengths of times for ownership of things, but I definitely do think that IP law needs to be there so that the initial creation of the idea is in fact protected. But at some point, right, it does just make its way into the culture.
Okay, next is going to be Fabian. Keep it above board.
So obviously this became a discussion about IP law, but the original situation was, should people like Pokemon have been banned by Twitch? I think that, so long as IP law exists, there will be coercion within this market, and that there's no way around it. Twitch has to deal with the situation the same we as content creators have to deal with the situation. That being said, I do think that IP law is a form of coercion and is unethical, and that there's no way around that. It just definitionally is, in my opinion. You can disagree, and I understand that as well. I hope that Twitch gets even worse so that we can get rid of some of these reaction Andes that don't actually do anything about it, because I hope that's a decision they make as a private company and not a decision that they make from coercion of the state. But that being said, in terms of the IP restrictions with DMCA and copyrighted material, that exists, and so of course Twitch has to engage with it as the law requires them to do so, and so that they don't have another adpocalypse.
James.
I literally hate this timeline and the universe because I have to agree with Fabian like at least like 85%, and it's literally making like a large piece of me die inside. That's my
Just accept we're anarchists and you'll be okay.
Wonderful. So Carter, Fabian, and James are all ANCAPs. Good to know. Rose.
No.
Yeah. All right. So most of the flaws I've seen pointed out, they can be reformed away. I don't know if it's been made clear enough because of the tempo of the conversation, but I'm in no way in favor of patent or IP laws and the way that they're functioning today. I think there are a lot of significant improvements that can be made along the way to make them a lot better and to minimize the negative externalities that we see with them right now. I had a panel on this exact thing before. I had it with Tiberius. So if for whatever reason people are more interested in that, then go check that out, I guess. A world fundamentally without some form of IP or patent laws is going to mean the death of large parts of innovation. The amount of innovation we see is going to go down dramatically. I don't see any way around this. When I was asking for the ANCAP solution to this topic, basically, as per my interpretation, what I got from that is basically either some form of like reconstruction government with some form of like legally binding contracts that function in pretty much in the same way as IP laws when it comes to the consequences and the legal consequences for like not specifically following those agreements, or you see the reconstruction of a monopoly which functions essentially as a government body. So it just seems like a way to just basically rebuild the exact same thing, but under the guise of the free market, so it's not as bad apparently. Or otherwise, if we don't go by that explanation, it just seems like a complete failure where you won't be able to account for basic questions like people making large investments and then just being ripped off. And then finally, looking forward, I'm excited to see how this new CTV and European alliance will function in the next part of this debate. But
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Star.
Okay, well, look, I tried to have an actual discussion about what it means to create something, what it means for something to be original, because as we all know, nothing really is original, but the thing that we're protecting is the labor put into changing that thing into something completely new, right? And transforming it into something new. But since we can't have that discussion, I'm just gonna say that I stan Ghostbusters. I've never seen it, but I stan it, okay? And I'll stan the most recent version. And then secondly, Fabio over here has no idea what he's talking about because Fabio has no idea what he's talking about because he can't make his own philosophy. Okay? He's just ripping from other people.
I'm realizing without context, CTV, that hashtag doesn't sound very good.
Nah. Context is important, but it still begs the question.
Okay.
It seems like something an incel would put on Twitter.
So now we're going to throw it over to Taft.
Hey,
well, there's your bias.
So the original question was about Twitch streaming and whether or not people should be able to stream entire TV shows on their platform to tens of thousands of people. And I think we all pretty much agree that as long as we want Twitch to exist, we can't allow this to happen. Otherwise, it's going to result in the entire platform imploding under copyright laws and lawsuits. The conversation switched, discussion about IP and copyright laws. And I think most people here can agree that IP, particularly copyright laws, could be reformed to allow ideas to open up to the public sooner, and maybe that'd be beneficial. However, I do believe that man has a right to own what he creates, and that includes intellectual creations. And so, from a moral standpoint, I think it's just and right that man be able to have ownership of intellectual property. And moreover, as many people on the panel have talked about and argued successfully, I think IP laws create some good outcomes. They incentivize the innovation and creation of new ideas, the patenting of new technologies, and so on. And where exactly that line needs to be drawn, I'm not sure, but I think we can agree that it needs to be somewhere.
Hashtag women are why.
So true.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the next topic, which is about...
wow.
Wow,
Dylan, holy shit.
Wow.
Look,
First Stardust and now Tiberius? Oh my god.
I know.
Okay, you're right. Stardust was a mistake. I'm sorry, Stardust. Anyway, Tiberius.
Wow.
Jesus.
Yeah, so we all agreed on the streamers part. I'm not going to haggle about that, but I actually put together a solution for IP reform. Now, you guys didn't bite on that, which really sucks, but I'm just going to reiterate it real quick, is that I want to take the current system IP and I'm going to reform it in the regards that I'm going to give you ownership, but it's mandatory that if somebody uses it, they give you a royalty, but it no longer gives you the function of monopoly. So I think that actually gets rid of the monopolistic problems that will come with this. I think it gets a lot of the regulatory capture while also giving people the investment incentive and still doing it because you're getting something back for the investments that you made. I think this is actually really easy. If you just use somebody else's shit, you got to give them a little bit. You know, I don't know how much that has to be, but I think that's a step in the right direction. So thank you for the outro.
Okay, now we can go on to the next topic. Okay. First, also, can people stop spamming Carter typing in my chat? It's very creepy. I don't understand why the mouth is so big. That's not your normal smile, is it, Carter?
Nah, that's no. I
Okay,
don't know
just
where
making
they got all that from. Someone made it.
Yeah. It looks like he could unhinge his mouth and just swallow a small child. It's very large mouth. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna go on to the next topic. The next topic is any gay man's dream, any woman's dream. Joe Manchin. So Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are both getting a lot of national media attention right now. A lot of people are thanking them for stopping Joe Biden's agenda, and a lot of people are hating them for stopping parts of Joe Biden's agenda. So my question to the audience is simple: is Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema a hero or a zero? Try to keep your intro short. We're gonna start with Carter.
Yeah, they suck. They're fucking dog shit.
Oh, wonderfully short. Next, we're gonna go to CTV.
Yeah. Do you smell that smell in the air right now? That smell is the smell that I smell around Democrats. Okay. The one that I smell after I hit the bowl, though, is what CTV is smoking. There you go.
Should have let Carter going after that.
Wait, was that yes or no? I have no idea.
Wow, you
It's
didn't get it,
beyond
Carter?
our
That was
Why don't you
Carter.
wait
It was
till we get into the open panel so I try to tell me how fucking open this statement is supposed to be? Huh? Stay in your fucking lane.
yeah, Carter. Why don't you stay in your lane? Okay, next we gotta go to Fabian.
Oh, I don't know how I'm going to follow those beautifully well-crafted arguments. I'm just going to say this. I find this topic to be interesting, not because the topic itself is something that I think is even worth answering in any way. But I find it interesting because I think it is a very like a collectivist view of politics, right? And I don't think that your regular standard conservative or centrist that kind of has that Protestant work ethic, individualist strain of American thought looks at this question and it makes any sense. I mean, to me, Sinema is a blue dog Democrat that is anti-gun, but blue dog Democrat in pretty much everything else from Arizona. And Manchin is a union fiscal Democrat. I think it's only really the left that has this idea that like you're supposed to deeply coalesce behind a party platform. And so if you're from the left, right, or from the center left may look at this and go, oh, wow, they're heroes for being individuals and going against the party. And like the radical left may go, I can't stand these people because they're so conservative. But I feel like if you're a centrist or center right or right in any regard, you look at this and just go, yeah, these are people in right-leaning districts, and so they're Democrats that are voted in for that reason. I don't think you could answer that as a zero or a hero. It's just kind of an is situation, and I don't really derive any like ought from that. Like that is the reality of the situation of Democrats being elected in right-wing districts, and so I don't really know what to add to this.
James.
Yeah, okay. Let's turn this up a notch. So, Manchin and even Kristen Sinema, they are actually both heroes to the Democratic Party leadership. They are doing exactly what they were installed to do. They have been unopposed and given constant presence and gifts from the Democratic Party leadership for the better part of the last decade. And I am extremely stoked to get to the open conversation period because I got a big old fat stack of receipts over here that I'm dying to whop people over the head with. So let's go.
Well, they don't hurt like steel chairs, motherfucker.
Thank you, CTV. I love CTV.
Or
Anyway, we're going to go over to
wheelchairs.
Rose now.
Yeah, so overall, I think large parts, majority of what Biden's doing is pretty good. So if people are going to be opposing that, I'm going to be, not very happy with that generally. That's kind of where I go. It's not like some deeper big thing with, oh, you have to fall into party lines or whatever. It's just mainly that. When it comes to the outcomes of Sinema and Manchin's behavior, Sinema's approval ratings have taken a significant drop, and there is a pretty high likelihood that she might suffer in the next upcoming primary. Manchin is from a more moderate district, so he isn't seeing much pushback. At the end of the day, I think that it's unfortunate that it's, split exactly 50-50 because it gives, it makes it so, exactly like in a very, very thin line how things are going to run. I would prefer it if the Democrats had a bigger split, so that would be easier to get things done. But yeah, I think that we can move towards both. Hey, if we're unhappy, if districts are unhappy with their appointed representatives, they should obviously do their best to pick a better a representative that represents them better. But also, I think that the main effort should be towards widening that 50-50 gap, so to make sure that we don't need to worry and it doesn't need to come down to, like two individuals in a party holding back a really, really large platform.
Okay. Next is going to be Star.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in this, what James has just said. I'm just wondering if you have all these like banger receipts, why wouldn't you just open with that? Like if I had all these banger receipts, I would just start whapping people in the head with them as my opening statement. Like nobody's gonna recover after that. But I mean, you know what? You have a different approach. That's totally fine. It sounds when you say they're put in place for the reason that they were put there for, it sounds a little conspiratorial, and I'm already very averse to that. But anyways, back to the original question. I would not bang Manchin. I don't think he's attractive. Sinema, maybe with enough coaxing and enough other substances, but I would not bang Manchin. That's a nightmare.
But
And
Tony the
then
Tiger is all
also
good, yeah.
Tony the Tiger is good. Yes. But that's not for public information. I would have appreciated if you didn't say that publicly. But anyways, right. What I was going to say is that kind of sucks, though. It's understandable why they voted the way that they did. Like Fabio said, they are in pretty red places, so it makes sense. I'm not somebody to characterize people as zeros or heroes, but it makes sense. And it just kind of sucks, especially with the Freedom to Vote Act. That kind of bothers me. So, yeah.
Okay. Next, we're going to throw it over to Taft.
Right. I mean, I think we've discussed poll data a little bit, and Manchin polls pretty good in West Virginia. Kirsten Sinema, she polls a lot less good. And if you look at her polling data, it looks like she really struggles with, against other Democrat incumbents or Democrat challengers. And even against Republicans, she's not doing as good as Kelly, the other Democrat senator in Arizona. So I think that from a purely political standpoint, what Kirsten Sinema is doing doesn't really make sense. What Manchin's doing makes more sense. But I think the question is interesting. Are they heroes or not? And I think we have to ask ourselves, what is heroism? And I think being a hero is about doing what you believe in, even when it's difficult and requires sacrifice and gets you flack. And I sort of think that Sinema is a good example of this. She's doing things that she believes in, even though they're politically unpopular. And I think I do have to give her some credit for that, even if I think fundamentally she, and this sort of overrides any heroism that she gets, any credit that she gets from voting her conscience. She lied to her constituents in order to get there. On immigration, she misrepresented her views. She misrepresented her views on the minimum wage and COVID relief and so on and so on. And so I think that's quite, worthy of condemnation. But I do also have to give her some credit for being brave enough to take a stand and do something politically unpopular.
Okay, and we're going to wrap up intros with Tiberius.
Yeah, so this is pretty simple for me in the general scheme of things, is that if you're a Republican, you probably like these two, and if you're a Democrat, you probably hate these two. Well, that was actually shocking. The thing I'm actually going to get off to the side of this is that when am I actually going to see these two parties not have an identity crisis to where the moment that they get elected, they can't fucking govern? I'd like to actually see Democrats maybe actually be able to put something to policy together where they can actually pass it, and the same from the Republicans. The parties aren't the same anymore. We're moving into the seventh party system. And for some reason, neither party has figured this out. Big business is flooding into the Democratic Party. Labor is actually flooding into the Republicans. You want to fight me on that? Bring it for the open panel. Let's go.
Okay. So it is now going to be the open panel. Is there anybody who wants to start us off?
Let's see the receipts. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, what are the receipts?
Sure.
Receipts.
Well, let's go with the
You have
basics
center
here.
stage, James.
Sure. Okay, let's analyze the last decade of Democratic Party history for Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. I remind you that Kirsten Sinema originally started her political career as part of the Green Party, where she was a fifth-place candidate who never got close to dick.
Are there any news?
I do not believe so, but it's still early in the year, so midterms are like 10 months away.
Okay.
So she was a do-nothing, go-nowhere candidate until she pivoted to the center, quote, against her beliefs, because she had a lot of bold beliefs when she was running as a Green Party member and coming in a distant fifth. But, since she really just swallowed the whole Dem-centrist corporate boot and got on board, well, all of a sudden she's gotten tons of financing. She hasn't gotten primaried by the DNC at all at either the state house level or the Senate level. She has been funded by the DNC and the DCCC leadership councils, and she currently sits on 4 committees, not 1, not 2, but 3, but 4. And guess what? If you're going against the will of the leadership of your party, you don't get 4 committees as a second-term senator. Second point, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin literally endorsed Joe Biden Joe Biden then nominated his wife for a job. Manchin sits on 4 committees and is the committee chair of the House Energy Committee, which is one of the largest committees in the Senate. So basically, Democratic Party leadership has funded, allowed them to run unopposed, endorsed them, received endorsements from them, and have given them cush committee assignments, all while, quote, doing the wrong thing or voting their own conscience. The only thing Manchin has ever done in lockstep with the Democratic Party, not Democratic Party leadership, was endorsing Hillary Clinton. He literally voted against every piece of Obama legislation too. But it doesn't matter because the Democratic Party leadership put him there. They funded his seat and they make sure that he runs unopposed. These are all non-debatable facts.
I have one question for you. If
Hit me.
she is such a shill for the Democratic leadership, why did she co-sponsor the Liberty bill with Justin Amash to limit the NSA from being able to collect electronic information without investigations? Isn't that
Performative theater is awesome.
absolutely against what the Democratic establishment wanted?
Yeah, performative theater is awesome. It's great when you sign on to a bill that you know not going to get passed, which is similar to like Joe Manchin being one of the original authors and sponsors of the bill that's going to be our third question, and yet all of a sudden now he's against it.
I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I fucking hate politicians as much as you do. But your evidence so far is her voting record, voting with the Democratic establishment, which most people would call center-left neoliberal, as she goes center-left.
Also part of the evidence is that she got funding from them.
I said nothing about the party. I only spoke of the party leadership.
Okay,
there's a huge difference. No. Hold on. Before you all go down this rabbit hole, there's a big ass difference between the 22 people who sit in the DNC and the DCCC leadership committees and the rank and file Democratic Party. Do not get that shit twisted.
Okay, so the DNC, right? She's voting in favor of what it is that they want as a centrist Democrat. Couldn't it just possibly be that she's funded because they want a Democratic senator from Arizona and it's a difficult district to have a Democrat in, and it doesn't, and if so long as she's there 80% or 70% or 60% of the time, it's much better than a Republican. Couldn't she be voting with the party establishment because, I don't know, she's like every other fucking politician?
She's a senator, she doesn't have a district.
Yeah, it's just for the state, but
she's state of Arizona. All right, cool. But nice pivot away from what it is that I actually asked you.
No, I mean, I think the point that you're making, FL Scott, is totally right. Like, it's not unusual for her to receive funding from the party because obviously the Democratic Party would prefer Sinema or Manchin to a Republican. So of course they're going to try to support her candidacy, especially if she becomes an incumbent after her term is up.
That sounds great. So how many candidates did the DNC and the DCCC fund to primary AOC? How many primary opponents did she have? 7? Was it 7?
So the reason for this is because her seat is
in a completely different voting environment. Yeah,
right?
She's not competing with Republicans.
I thought
there's no need to compete they all have Democrats there. While with Sinema, you have a lot. You're competing against the Republicans, right? You're going to funnel all your shit into one person.
I'm talking about a primary.
I want to have.
Yeah, it's exactly what Rose just said. Like, she's going up against Republicans, so of course she's going to get all of the funding. Versus where AOC is, it's going to be split.
Where it's like it's a deep blue space. Yeah.
No. Okay. When the Democrats don't like somebody who's seated, when the DNC or the DCCC Leadership Council does not like somebody, they run candidates against them in the primary. They primary them from the left or from the right, depending on where the candidate sits. The Democratic Party has run fucking primary opponents against some 400 to 500 incumbents over the last 20 years.
But how likely is that in her area? Like how likely is the success of that working out in her area?
I mean,
get another
realistically,
Democrat.
They're going to primary her probably from the left.
Okay, so probably is your defense
That's what
against the
all
10
the
years of
polling
history.
right now points
Yeah.
towards by like a large
That's
margin.
great. So once again, I'm going to ask this question. Is probably going to happen your counter argument to the 10 years of historical fact that I just laid out? Yes or no?
She hasn't been a senator for 10 years. She was a senator
Well,
starting in
Manchin has a way
2018.
longer history.
Right. She ran back in 2011 as a Green Party candidate and got wiped, and then turned around and pivoted to the center of the DNC so that she would get funding from the actual leadership council of the party, so that she would get endorsements, so that large state and regional Democrats
She joined the more
would come to
effective
her
party.
rallies.
Yeah, that's just like another way to say it, right?
Wait,
But also,
can I
she
do
was
it?
in the
Wait,
House for a while.
Pause for a second. I want to do a show of hands quick. If you don't agree with James, raise your hand. Okay.
What's the?
Well, I'm just. Okay, if you
Yeah, I'm
agree with
sorry. I'm a
James,
little lost on what his main
wait,
thesis even is.
okay.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question.
Yeah, I'm a little
maybe we can ask that
confused.
exact question.
Can I do the
after
second
this.
part? Wait. Can I?
Okay,
do
my
the
God, go for it.
second thing first? Because if that, then I'm just bullying him if I'm just asking that question. If you agree with James, raise your hand. Okay, so we're cut basically down the middle somewhat. Okay, Rose, you wanted to go on?
Yeah,
There
so
was some challenges for a second.
just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what the implication here. So it sounds like what you're saying here, James, is that you're kind of implying that cinema, Manchin kind of, but not as much, but cinema specifically is like a textbook person that the Democratic leadership has put in there in order to hinder political progress. Is that what the implication is?
No, my implication is that she wanted to get into politics because she wanted to do all this great humanitarian change. Ran in the Green Party, once at the county level, once at the state level, got absolutely obliterated, came in a distant last place, and then pivoted her personal ideology so that she would be more attractive to Democratic Party leadership as a possible candidate that they could trot out, even though there's roughly, I don't know, 1.3 million other Democrats in the state they could have picked from.
Do you have
So
any
what's your conclusion with all this? What's your main message? What about cinema? What was this history going to prove?
My conclusion, well, the question was cinema and Manchin, are they, quote, heroes or villains for shooting down basically the entire last year and a half of planned Democratic legislation? To which my answer is they are heroes because they are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. The Democratic
What
Party
is what they're
leadership,
supposed to do? Okay, so now we get to this. Yeah, perfect. Keep going.
Okay.
The Democratic Party leadership.
Party leadership continues to fund both of them, continues to allow them to run unopposed, endorses them, receives endorsements from them, and gives their spouses high-paying, powerful jobs. These are not things you do if somebody is a quote,
why are they doing that?
traitor to the party.
What's the quiet part, James? Why are they doing that? They're doing that because
I would assume because legislation should continue to be pushed out at a crawl the way it has been over the last decade to decade and a half, because everything's working really great for people who are doing really great right now. And
so then you
the people
basically
who have
agree with the
most
thing I
money
asked you
and
originally
the
that you
most
said no,
lobbying
which is that you
power.
think cinema is like an inside job to hinder progress by the
No, I don't
Democratic
think
Party.
to say she's an inside job
Conspiracy of
makes
some
it sound like it's some
The Democratic leadership, come on, dog. Like,
Okay, wait.
That's what
Okay,
people
so I'm
say,
gonna.
yeah?
dog. No, dog. What do you mean? Tell
oh,
me.
no,
Well, what
I'm
you're saying
sorry,
is
I
that,
should
like,
not
the
say
party
that.
put her
We're
there.
pausing. We're
No,
pausing.
you want to
We're
do
pausing.
this?
We're pausing. We gotta pause for a second. Okay, Carter, you wanted to say something and write your hand down to Beers.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. I mean, I'll take the bait. It doesn't matter to me if it's conspiracy or not. It's proven that, I mean, Republicans and Democrats are both two sides of the same coin. They both look to, improve capital and whatever. So it doesn't matter. The Democrats obviously have like had majority like bunch of times and never do anything with it. The Demo-cucks, I like to call them. Okay. And so they need someone to paint as the bad guy, but then actually do nothing. And as James points out, there's lots of history to prove that the Democratic Party over and over does nothing against people that are the bad guys. They just talk about it, and nothing ever happens.
So we
Can I
have
just
two
say
people then
real
that believe to
quick-
some extent that she's like
can I just
somebody
say
placed there to
real
hinder
quick-
progress. Yeah.
I wouldn't say
So-
she's the placement. Wait, wait.
Okay, CDB, he's very cute. Okay.
So I don't think the placement it matters because it could have been anyone, and I think maybe that's what James is alluding to. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think James alluding to that Cinema was just willing to do it because she was the most, she flipped parties, she did all this stuff. She's just a really good person to fill this role, and that's
Of hindering
conspiratorial, and
progress.
that's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, of
Can I
course, yeah.
just say this? I'm just
Okay,
going to
cool. Now
quote
we have
George
on
Carlin
wrong with
here.
that.
So just quote George Carlin here, right? Like, you don't need a conspiracy when like interests align, right? Like, it doesn't need to be this like, this backroom deal, like working together in a cabal to change individuals' minds that like secretly lie about shit. No, politicians lie through their fucking teeth to get elected because that's what politicians do. And individuals that are in right-leaning districts tend to actually be successful and get funded by the party are people that are centrist left. So because it's a choice between that or usually a more far right Republican candidate, because if you have a right leaning district, you tend to have Republicans that lean to the right and Democrats that lean to the right. If you have a left leaning district, you tend to have Democrats that are more progressive, and you tend to or states if it triggers anybody, right? That lean
States
to
are
the left,
different.
and you tend to have center right conservatives because the Overton window in that state or in that district shifts in one direction, and especially when it shifts heavily in one direction or close enough, the DNC and other corporations and stuff, they're willing to put in more money into those places because those are battleground places. Like, the idea that it's this big conspiracy, I think, is somewhat silly, but also the idea that we discount what James is saying in terms of the fact that obviously the establishment likes these types of people because they're neoliberals is also kind of funny too. Like, I think we can kind of meet in the middle here and just simply say that this is just how the game is played.
Okay, so I have then just two questions. One thing I want to point out, which is that Cinema won, and she ran on an explicitly pretty progressive agenda, and then since her election, she has like rolled that back and kind of taken a lot more of a moderate position. Just wanted to add to what was being said before. So we have gotten to the point now where we agree that certain members of this panel, they believe that Cinema is kind of placed there in an attempt to hinder progress from the party as a whole. That's her purpose for being there. It doesn't necessarily have to be like Cinema. It just she's the person that fills the position, so to say. So then, just another question, just to perfectly flesh out, so I can understand exactly what the theory is here. Why do the Democrats want to place someone there that's going to explicitly go against and hinder their own agenda within their like legislative goals and ambitions?
God damn it, Rose.
Carter?
It's because progressive. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. It's because being progressive is kind of like, it's trendy to an extent, I want to say. But this is a bad argument. But what it's looks good, right? If they can have someone who is going against the facade of progress that the Democratic Party wants to go towards, but the Democratic Party doesn't want progress. They want to maintain status quo. That's why our Overton window is so far, right, and everything. We're super neoliberal. There's no reason for the Democratic Party just needs an enemy. That's exactly what it is. It could be anybody.
And the Republicans aren't enough?
I mean, the Republicans obviously are enough. It doesn't matter. The Democrats need someone in their own party. They need a scapegoat.
Yeah,
Do you want to say
God
something?
forbid, if you ever get to the point where, like, God forbid, like, the Democrats get a shit ton of power, like, Obama's first term, when they literally had the Senate, the House, and the White House, and then rather than, I don't know, making a constitutional amendment to, make abortion legal or trying to fix a whole bunch of stuff, hold on, wait a minute, let me check my notes. Oh, made it mandatory for everybody to buy insurance from a private health company. That's literally the extent of the political will of the Democratic majority when they have power.
But what about what
Politicians,
Biden has
right?
accomplished just over the
Wait,
last year?
wait,
Some
like,
really like big landmark policies.
real quick.
It's absolutely
I promise I'm
insane.
super quick.
Like,
Stop,
for
boy, I don't
20
care.
years.
I don't care. Okay, Tiberius.
Yeah, so I want to pick your brain a little bit on this, James, because just looking at this is that either you have to assume, from my perspective, that the DNC leadership is absolutely and utterly stupid, or you have to basically roll onto the idea that stagnation is somehow a good thing for either party. Like, we're literally seeing the most competitive elections ever, where we're literally flipping back and forth on a 4-year basis. This does not seem to be a viable strategy for success. It seems like a viable strategy to get your party killed. I don't.
When there's two parties, a party doesn't get killed.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, if you
quick.
can't get
Politically,
anything, then
we
we're
don't
just in
get
the
any power.
seesaw effect.
Yeah.
I mean,
And like
here's-
sooner or later,
I just
sooner or
wanna say
later,
real
I'll just,
quick,
I'll
the
just find out.
Republicans have had on their party platform auditing the Fed for more than 20 years. They've had power to do that multiple times, right? The Democrats and the Republicans, they make up shit for their base that they believe in, because they know that it's shit that won't get passed. And it's the same situation like I brought up with James when I said, why did she vote with Justin Amash? Because she knew the shit wouldn't fucking pass,
Right.
and she knew it would look good. At the same time, when you say that she ran on a progressive agenda, I think it's important to note that while she did flip-flop on some of the things that she ran on, she also ran as a war hawk, right? She was for gun control, but she was also for state intervention overseas, right? Which is not a traditionally Democrat progressive thing, right? So like she's always been someone that has like at least in her congressional and Senate elections, has never been someone that's like ran like a fucking AOC progressive or something.
I want to
The
throw it over to
idea-
Taft for a bit.
Okay, thank you, Del. The idea that the left or the progressives or the Democratic Party is just like preventing progress is absolutely mind-numbingly insane to me. Because if you look at the entire history of the last 600 years in the West, or 200 years, or 50 years since rights acts and, marriage equality, we can think of any major issue in that entire time, and every major issue has been won by the progressive side. We've only moved left in this time. We continue to move left, and it's absolutely absurd that like progressives will play this game where they pretend like no progress is being made, but they just keep like winning and crushing the opponents. And the Republicans, we say like two sides of the same coin. And the implication is that the Democrats like aren't doing anything, right? And they're just letting like conservatives walk all over them. But it's the exact opposite. Like the Conservative Party is complete like garbage because it can't actually like do anything to reverse progressivism or reverse modernity. Like it just passes tax cuts, but doesn't really fundamentally change anything. So, I mean, like the entire like conversation seems like totally premised on just something that seems totally absurd to me. But
Facts.
I mean, I think if we like go all the way back, like yeah, I don't think that like the Democratic Party is like secretly trying to like keep things from progressing too quickly. I mean, I think that there are much easier explanations for why funding goes to Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. And it's because like they are presumed to be effective Democratic candidates, and probably in 2000 or when Kyrsten Sinema is running against a challenger, he's probably going to lose that seat because she polls really poorly. And so the Democratic Party is going to change their political tact because ultimately they want political power. And so they're going to fund a different candidate that has a better chance of winning, right? And that's just political survival, of course.
Hey, wait, since that was directed to me, can I direct rebut?
Please. I'd love to hear it.
We
Real
have
quick?
CTV
Real
on
quick?
the list and
I'll go real
Tiberius
quick.
and Carter.
I'll go
as
real
well.
quick.
Okay.
Yeah. Polling against hollow candidates who don't exist yet don't mean shit.
No. She's polling against real candidates poorly.
Mitch McConnell polled at 28% and beat Amy McGrath by 36 points. And that's after the Democrats funded her to the tune of $62 million.
I mean, was that a national poll or a poll in his state?
These aren't what's probably going to happen. These are things that actually happened.
No, because Mitch McConnell polls well in his state.
Okay, I was going to actually ask a clarifying question. Was those polls nationally 28% or domestically?
No, Mitch McConnell in Kentucky had a 28% rate of approval 11 months before the election. And he was actually getting beaten out by McGrath's primary candidate.
Okay.
Who was also beating McGrath until the Democrats started loading millions of dollars on her.
Okay, we have a list. We're going to go CTV, Carter, then Tiberius.
Stardust as well. In the end.
April, could you repeat what you were saying before all of that?
Oh, what?
What you were saying before James started talking, because there was a very important point to be made there, but like it got so loud that I couldn't concentrate for a moment. So if you wouldn't mind.
I mean,
that's your fault.
I was just frustrated by the argument that, the progressive wing or the Democratic Party is not moving culture or society left. Very clearly look at historical trends that we've left on every issue.
I never said that.
I think it was Carter who brought this up, but like you also implied or directly stated that the Democratic Party leadership likes Kyrsten Sinema, they can use her as like a kind of internal moderate legislation. Is that fair?
That's dead balls on point.
Okay.
Okay, good. So now that we're at this point, right? Like, it's important to understand, right? One, it's Democrats, right? It smells of shit no matter what. Two, the fact of the matter is that the conservative stance, as soon as there was ever just that one smallest iota over history, right, of justification, because you'll hear the lefties argue on like the extremes of the thing and then be willing to settle, right, and then argue on the extremes of things and then be willing to settle, right, and then argue on the extremes of things and then be willing to settle, right, over time, right, this shit that keeps fucking being thrown at the fucking wall, right, and left there still smells like shit at the end of the fucking day, right? So what happens is you get Democrats that just constantly throw shit at the wall, right? Hopefully some of it sticks, and then we can pull a little bit more out of the government's not involved in this thing, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get government involved in this thing, right? So they throw more shit at the wall. And at the end of all of it, I'm still left here smelling shit.
This is why conservatives are just progressives going the speed limit.
God damn it! I was literally about
so true, so true.
Yeah, no, like literally, that was the point I was going to bring up. There's a level to what April was saying, where I'm just like, to a large degree,
it wasn't a Carter first.
I thought he already went. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, okay, since
I say shit and everybody fucking just loses their minds. They forget order and reason and discipline just because I said shit. Well, if that's the case, next time I say shit, just shut the fuck up until you give permission to speak. How's that?
CGV, I will say, when you speak, I forget that order and reason exist. I'm gonna throw it over to Carter.
So the response to April, she says that everything's been progressive. Well, I think you have to, otherwise those societies fail. So the thing is, the Democrats are just the ones who settle for the little bit of progress, because if you don't progress a little bit, because people become more educated, society advances, whatever, but we still maintained capital and capital interest, which is inherently right. And therefore, the progress that does happen and the progress that goes is just something that you have to do so that society doesn't fall apart. The progress has been minimal. If you truly wanted progress, the reason I call myself a progressive is I look to go further than just settling and or just moving enough. Because in America, we live on what I call the drip feed, which is like we're living on that barely line. Most people in the world live barely on the line just not to die, right? Most people are just barely not dying. And when they start dying, they rise up. Revolution happens. We had a civil war in America, right? Progress. The biggest bunch of progress happened after society almost collapsed. That was a war of the public versus capital. So
I address the point brought up. If you search on 530, our website, you can look at how Mitch McConnell polled in Kentucky versus McGrath. And you'll find that for every single poll except for one, Mitch McConnell significantly outperformed his challenger. There's only one poll which shows McGrath polling slightly higher. It's in 2020, and it's by 1 point. And everything else has him polling plus 20 points, plus 22 points, plus 17.
What was his approval polling in the state before McGrath came in? What was his approval rating?
I mean, if you look at his polling versus McGrath, which is the relevant factor for election,
yeah, absolutely,
he polls significantly better.
It's absolutely relevant. Just because people are always unhappy with their politicians, right? But at the end of the day, if you have to pick between them, that's what matters.
Right.
I'm not saying that. I said what he was polling at. I didn't say what he was polling at versus a competitor. Okay.
Oh,
okay. What he was polling at. What?
Well, he polls well against his competitors. Like, we have that data.
That's what matters. That's the only thing that matters.
And he polls significantly better.
To your point, because it's what you're trying to prove here, Roseworth. Yes, it depends on who the candidate is. This is why, like, you can look at a poll that shows right now that John Fetterman polls 12 points against a generic Republican, but in early polling against Mohammed Oz, he only polls +1. So whoever the candidate is versus no candidate, Fetterman polls +12 against no-name Republican or no Republican candidate, but is currently only polling +1 versus Dr. Oz, even though there's 7 potential candidates. So there's a huge differential between how somebody's initially polling, how somebody's polling versus generic insert name here, and how they poll versus specific candidates. All 3 are different numbers for very different reasons.
So let me remind you why we had to bring up this and why Taft went and looked it up was because Taft brought up Cinema's approval ratings in regard to her competitors, and Cinema was doing poorly there. And then you were like, oh, those don't mean anything. Look at Mitch McConnell's. We looked at Mitch McConnell's polling against his competitors, and in those polls, Mitch McConnell is winning. So that doesn't support your argument. That doesn't support the reason why you brought it up at all in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, because that's versus generic, because Cinema doesn't have the Republican primary hasn't finished, so they're not polling her against a specific candidate that's already won the Republican nomination. Again, to your point, it depends on who the candidate is you're opposing. Your point, not mine.
I think that's what we like to call you getting smacked upside the head. I'm just saying.
Can I address what April said just a little bit ago?
Sure, Tiberius and Stardust.
Appreciate that. So I want to spit some fire at some folks for a second here. When it comes to Republicans, I kind of have to just give them the credit of, you guys are the brakes. Like, they don't have an alternative vision. They don't have alternative solutions. It's literally just, we don't like that. Stop the Democrats from doing it. Even the whole like anti-abortion thing. Yeah, it's made on moralistic grounds, but they don't actually have any kind of way of getting that out. Worst case scenario is we see the reversal of Roe v. Wade, in which it goes back to the states. That becomes a state issue. It doesn't actually just go away. So yeah, Republicans need their own vision on how to solve shit. And then I'm going to throw just as much shade at the Dems. I will agree with, James a little bit, and that it seems to be that the Dems don't want to get to a point where they seem too far left. They are very concerned about that, so they are going to police their own. But on the other side of that is that it seems like a little bit of practical politics. The thing that I'm going to throw some serious shade at is my good friend Rose here, because you know what? I don't like the Democrats and what they're trying to do, because it sounds like they just want to be Europe light, and I don't like where Europe's fucking at right now.
Let's go.
Yeah, I don't
close
like
to
where
where
Europe is. They've got no fucking kids, and they can't stand up to the Russians. Big Daddy USA has to come in and fucking bail them out. Like, fuck this shit. Let's not be like Europe.
Bro, all that matters is military. That's all. That's the American brain turned on. We have bigger number for military. All the other things matters. The freedom indexes, they don't matter. The quality of life, they don't matter. The happiness indexes, they don't matter. The progression doesn't matter. All that matters is the military.
Listen to that.
I think this might be better.
Utilitarian calculus.
All right. I want to go over some of the other points that was being made here, which I think there's more lines to go down there. So once again, I want to touch on the thing that really originally started this, which was the theories about like cinema and stuff. So the explanation that I've gathered from some of the other panelists is that the DNC leadership propped up Cinema specifically in order so that she would fight against and hinder political progress in an attempt to be political theater while pretending to be progressive so they get the vote while not actually getting anything done, because two sides of the same coin, capital wants to push against any of the real changes in society, yada yada yada. What I think is the most simpler explanation is that, hey, Cinema was running in a district that typically goes red. The DNC is probably going to throw a lot of their weight, if not all their weight, against on one candidate. And then what ends up happening, that candidate gets a lot of disproportionate control. They get a lot to say in things. They change the positions respectively. Now they're household names, which is going to be effective for them personally in their personal gain. Now, I also want to push back against some other things, such as like the two sides of the same coin and like, oh, Biden isn't doing anything or whatever. Biden in just 1 year has done a pretty significant margin of landmark stuff that previously has been talked about for a really long time. The, pulling out of Afghanistan, the COVID relief, the Build Back Better bill, the slashing of child poverty. These have all been super, super significant things that have only been accomplished in the 1 year. I don't buy the explanation of like, oh, Democrats don't really want to do anything, yada, yada, yada. They have gotten a lot of stuff done despite this issues with Manchin and Cinema and the stuff of it. And yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Okay, next is going to be Stardust, then Carter. Then we'll probably look at wrapping up this round.
I mean, all I was gonna say is that I feel like I don't really buy this idea that there were candidates put in place by the Democratic leadership to be the opposition to the rest of the Democratic Party. Just if we look at polling in general, the further left Democrats don't really poll that well. What I would say is that They don't poll well, and if you honestly in a state that's red, if you go too left, they're gonna lose, and then we risk everything, and then it just makes sense that these people are doing what they think their constituents would want them to do. I think that's just pretty much it. That's what it seems like to me.
Okay, Carter.
So response to Rose, I think Biden has done dog shit. I think Afghanistan was good, but the other things that you said, and here's the reason I disagree. Like, remember how I said that things only progress when public demands progress, otherwise the detriment of society. Well, we kind of went through this thing called like a global pandemic. And so the Build Back Better bill was kind of like, we've come to a head, like there's a lot of labor in America, like things are somewhat kind of like reaching ahead to a little bit of a point. And then the relief bill, it's like, well, then people just starve or go homeless or whatever, even though there was a lot of expanse on, what's it called, unemployment and things like that. I still think it's just that you're chipping away, like there's no real progress, nothing really sticking. Everything is kind of like, childhood poverty cut in half. I'm pretty sure it's like already like rising again, and it's going to hit the same levels or be about average.
So what you explained there, that's democracy, that's electoral politics functioning, right? You can't just hand wave and be like, oh, they aren't actually doing anything, because what it actually is a changing of demands, and therefore the politicians can reflect the demands. That's what politics is. It's the politicians changing to reflect demands.
You're right, but that's not progress. That's just maintaining so you don't fall apart, right?
Well,
that's
it's
different.
Progress, right? If the population demands are moving in more progressive
it's
directions,
that
and the
fall apart, right? Would you call that maintaining? Like if you sit there with a building, right? Let's say you build a building, right? And that's the building of society, and you maintain it. Like you have to put on new paint or whatever so it doesn't fall apart, or reinforce it.
Yeah.
And you keep doing it, and then the earth slowly moves and shakes and whatever, and eventually you have to keep put new steel in or whatever, and you move it, maybe you make it a little bit stronger, it'll last 2 more years, when in reality maybe you could just build a dome or whatever that'll never break, or like some concrete bunker that will never, erode, or maybe it takes way longer to erode instead of very slowly chipping away. So I'm trying to come up with an analogy thing.
What you're saying isn't that they aren't doing anything progressive. You're saying that they aren't doing it fast enough.
They're just maintaining. Like they're doing what they have to.
But they're literally not maintaining. They're doing new things. They're responding to new demands. You said this in the very first thing you said.
So just because they're responding to new demands does not mean they're taking progress, but the progress is not enough to do anything that couldn't be undone in one day, if my sense, or not literally one day, by the way. Is what I mean is there's the progress that's there is so incremental, like tiny, that it doesn't matter. They're only doing what they have to, otherwise you won't exist anymore. Society in the way that we know it, or the system that we know it, wouldn't exist.
Okay, so like the massive, like
it's an offset.
Yeah, but it's still progress at the end of the day. And the massive COVID release bill, like slashing about child poverty by half, which is like a fucking
which is coming
margin.
Right back, right? We've
I'm
seen
not sure if it's coming right
no,
back.
Why? How is it coming right back?
We're seeing a trend right now, by the way. So the big cut of childhood poverty came with stimulus checks, and the unemployment, I'm pretty sure, is like where we saw a lot of that come through. It's easier for people to get
refunds as well as one of the really big ones.
Refunds, yeah, exactly. Which isn't something that was put in forever. Those are temporary. We can see and we expect it. The childhood poverty will probably return to what it is unless we see massive leaps in policy. That's
like
why I'm saying
the
you
things
have
that
to
are maybe in the Build Back Better
Okay,
bill.
so you're blaming him for something that hasn't happened yet.
Blaming who? For what?
You're saying that he cut child poverty in half, but guys, we can't give him that credit because he's gonna change it back. We're gonna get rid of that. That's ridiculous.
I'm agreeing with you.
That's so that's
you win
silly.
This debate.
Well, okay, then I guess we'll wrap that one up. We're going to have everybody do ending statements. We're going to start in the bottom right-hand corner with Tiberius.
So what the hell is the original topic again? We were talking about cinema and Manchin being
the problem with Ayn Rand is that she's
general point
left-wing.
there. I don't really care. I want parties that actually can get something fucking done for the American people,
the
and neither party is remotely impressive. I
degeneration
like to refer to the Democrats as the party of bad
culture.
ideas, and the Republicans as the party of no ideas.
That's my take on
I would like
Ayn
to see that
Rand.
change, and I'm very happy that the coalitions are moving around, and maybe we can actually have a fresh innovation of new ideas with business moving into the Democrats and labor moving into the Republicans. That makes new coalitions, that makes new ways of operating, and hopefully, sooner or later, one of these parties can figure out that the game is fucking changed. I'll end with that.
Okay, we're going to throw it over now to Taft.
Okay, great. The first question that we started this debate was...
Muted?
You're muted.
Muted.
Great. We started this debate with the question of whether Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are heroes or zeros. I don't think they're heroes for what they're doing. I certainly don't think that Kyrsten Sinema is a hero, considering she misrepresented herself to her constituents in order to get her elected position, then went back on many of her promises. Manchin, I think he's accurately representing the politics of West Virginia, which I think is admirable. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's just politics. I don't think you get special credit for doing essentially what your job is telling you to do. In regards to the broader political discussion, I think that progressives will also oftentimes give this line, which is very typical, where they will say that if you're not progressing fast enough, then you may as well be conservative. And ultimately, if you're the kind of person who is not becoming more left-wing with time, or you're a kind of person who's only becoming slightly more left-wing with time, eventually the progressive culture will surpass you and you will become a conservative or a reactionary. And so I think time and the progressive impulse to constantly move left will make conservatives of us all. And we see that in real time with Biden, where right now he's not moving progressively fast enough for the progressive wing. And so he's being called, you know, just the same as a Republican, despite the fact that objectively, I think he's done extraordinary strides, extremely progressive, you know, policy that he's implemented successfly. So that is my overall take.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Star.
Again, I think that people are looking for things where they're choosing the most complicated answer for something that's pretty simple. If you are a Democrat politician in a Republican majority state, you're probably going to be more center left than far left. And it just makes sense that it's better to have somebody who will at least vote part of the time with the Democratic Party than somebody who will never vote with the Democratic Party. It just makes sense that that's what's happening and that they're looking at what their constituents want and they are voting in line with that. So I don't think that there's a zero or a hero in this. I think it's just the way it is.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Fabian.
Yeah, so I don't really know what to add to this topic because I think the topic in and of itself is extremely boring. But I mean, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are probably the only time they've ever been interesting is that one time that Kyrsten Sinema wore thigh-high boots and got made fun of on Twitter. That is the peak of her entire career in terms of being entertaining in any way, shape, or form. I will simply say this, that I don't think that there's a conspiracy here. I absolutely agree with Taj, which this is the first time I end up simping for someone and saying, hey, I agree with this person on that. And I will also say that this topic was so utterly boring and trash that my chat is just trying to figure out whether or not Taj is an objectivist. And that's literally all my chat is trying to figure out, because she's saying lefty things, but also using terms like modernity and objectively, and gave an IP argument that sounds like an objectivist. So that's literally it. That's all I got for you.
I'm saying lefty things? What?
that last, they're just trying to figure out. Can you answer for us?
I'm not an objectivist, but maybe we'll talk about this more. I think that there are some good parts of objectivism and some bad.
All right, we'll link up sometime.
Okay, throwing it over now to James.
Yeah, so I want to seem responsive to the other people on the panel, even while I'm here making my closing statement. So I know Stardust said it seems like we're trying to, make this huge, conflated, big, huge conspiracy. It's like Charlie Day in front of the board with the strings and the pictures. Yeah, okay, so here, I'll make it a lot simpler. Capital will always serve and protect capital. Thank you. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, Rose.
Yeah, so I think that Biden's agenda is good. I support a lot of things that he do. Manchin and Cinema obviously are in opposition to that, so by extension, I'm in opposition to their opposition, so to say. Now, Cinema seems to be getting punished for that, and the polls that we can see, Manchin not so much. He seems to be more accurately representing the will of his constituents, just like Taft pointed out. When it comes to the entire thing about how Cinema was placed there in the DNC leadership and whatever, I think it's just way easier and way more productive and way more likely to be correct to favor the simpler explanation on the topic. I reject the whole two sides of the same coin thing. I do think that Biden has done a lot, especially with the tight position that he has been put in. I'm going to repeat again, the Afghanistan pullout, the COVID relief, the cuts to child poverty, the Build Back Better bill, which has been cut significantly, but nevertheless is still a pretty important piece of legislation. And keep in mind, this was all done solely in 1 year period with a 50-50 split, hence why we're having this conversation, at all. And yeah, that's what I have to say on this topic.
Now we can throw to the CTV.
Rose, you're so full of shit. Biden's fucking plan for Afghanistan was absolutely abhorrent, and there's no reason for you to be sitting there saying that it was good at fucking all. This is
maybe
how
you should
I know.
soak it up during the open panel.
You shut the fuck up during my fucking closing statement, you little fucking prick. You got me? Right. So from there, right, it's obvious. Right? Since Europeans obviously don't know fuck all when it comes to fucking American politics, or even fucking what's going on in the Middle East, or even what constitutes a good fucking plan for a fucking pullout, right? The only thing that I know is that Europeans are probably susceptible, right, to the biggest irony in the world, which is getting pregnant on a pull-out couch. Yeah, that just happened, right? Just splooged all over it, right there. All over it, right? So, Rose, there's no reason for anybody to be taking your take serious at this point. I'm glad that you're here as a meme, right? There's totally a reason for you to be here as a meme. Like, for the rest of it, though, all this topic is a lefty fucking circle jerk that, frankly, I don't really give two flyings of a fuck about. So, lefties, fucking jerk yourselves off. I don't give a fuck.
If you have an issue, bring it up during the open panel instead of hiding behind your prepared quote statements. Okay, that's all I gotta say. Okay.
Carter, or as we will call him going forward, CTV2.
I love Joe Biden. That's it.
You love Joe Biden?
I love him, dude. I wish he would. Yeah, he's my dad.
What's your favorite thing about him?
You were gonna say daddy, and you couldn't.
Yeah,
you couldn't,
I wanted to be my daddy.
You wanted to say daddy so hard.
My favorite thing about him is when he's giving his speeches and he's like slowly falling asleep. It just turns me on. No, I think my actual closing statement is I think yeah, they suck, but I think also I agree with Rose has good points, right? But I do think that they're there to just maintain, they're there to not really have any progress.
Okay, we're gonna go to the last topic of the night, but first, before we do that, for everyone at home, I have an announcement for you. Okay, number one, I will be at DebateCon, a real thing that is actually for some reason happening this weekend in Texas, where I will be debating everyone's favorite lovable icon, Infrared. And I will also say that officially, it does look like he's dodging now the boxing match he said he was gonna, do with me. So yeah, there was a thing, but maybe he won't back out of it actually. But who knows? But this weekend,
did boxing, right? I think I recall you saying something about that, right?
I boxed in high school. Yeah.
That's a new meta. Fuck debates. Fuck React content. Fuck manifestos. It's boxing time.
Exactly. That's actually why he's backing out now. Anyway, now second thing, we've actually started a Patreon here at Dylan Burns TV. And there's a lot of things you can get from the Patreon. Number one, the pleasure of giving me money.
I hate you too now,
less
brother
money in your
Sukes.
wallet. Number three, crippling debt from
We are
giving
going
me
to
so much
fight.
money.
We are going
And
to
so much
duel.
more. There's some movie
dawn.
nights in there. There's some other benefits.
Going to
Q&A
destroy
stuff,
you.
Any of that. But I would appreciate if you all gave it a look out. I said if we hit 50K, I would do it, and I meant it. So if you want to go to Dylan Burns TV on Patreon, you can support the channel, and that would be pretty cool. Look at that. It's on screen now. It's scrolling. Isn't that lovely? Go support this. Go get all these lovely tiers. You can go
and we're making a partner push over in the Wolf's Den too.
Wow.
Oh, wait. So you could come view over here. Oh wait, we're
Mary
not doing
Taft Smith, everybody.
self-promotion? Oh, my bad.
Yeah, I'm talking to
from
you.
Mover and Shaker pill, the queer pill, the red pill.
Who
the
is she
blue pill,
talking
the black
to?
pill. So many different roles. But now let's go to the last topic of the night. Also, remember to donate, sub, all of that stuff for tonight. It is much more
God, this
difficult to
panel's
create these
fucking
things
long.
on a weekly basis than you think. Carter, I had to drag Carter
Yeah, I'm gonna
in here.
destroy you.
I dragged
Your
him in by his
tiny,
tail.
delicate
Yeah,
body
well, you have to stay, so I'll stay the whole time. Yeah, I'm
under my
it's up past my
unbelievably
bedtime, an old
fat
man.
bum.
Wow, an
Just
old man.
Free
Yep.
Danabo. Free
Crush.
Danabo.
Don't free down about
Destroyed.
He's
I'm
British.
going to schedule more panels. Okay, last topic of the night. I already forgot what it was. Let me go check. Last topic of the night. Oh yes, the one that actually has to do with standing policy. Do you support the Freedom to Vote Act? The Freedom to Vote Act. It is legislation that Joe Biden just made a massive speech about. He compared opposition to it in that speech to Jim Crow. It was an extremely fiery speech and compared its opponents to George Wallace. So I'm going to go around the room and ask them, do you support the Freedom of the Vote Act? We're going to start in the bottom left-hand corner with Stardust.
Yeah, I support it. I looked at it before, and it looks like that it's got a whole lot of good stuff in it. I understand that people are concerned because it seems to take away a lot of the state responsibility and puts it more of like into federal power, I guess. But just online, automatic, and same-day voter registration, that is going to change so much. Election day being a federal holiday, that's a fucking banger, dude. A minimum of 15 days early voting. Why would anybody oppose this? I don't know. It just seems fucking based. So, and also restoring voting rights to previously incarcerated people. That's based as well. So yeah, I think it's such a banger. I don't understand why anybody would oppose it, but prove me wrong. So.
Okay. Carter?
Yeah, seems pretty good.
Wow. See, he knows
Oh,
how to
you
keep
like
it short
Biden
and
now,
sweet.
huh?
We're going to throw it now over
I
to
said it.
Tiberius.
Yeah, so I was going over this and I found about 70% of this bill I particularly like. Stardust actually hit a few of them that I actually really do care about, and that is the alleviation of felony records is a huge one for me. I've been advocating in this for 10 fucking years, and I'd love to see that hit. There's a few other things I can give you, but the long story short here is that I can be moved out of this position because FLS went into the finer details of this, but he was not able to share those particular details. So he
told
said
me in 10 minutes before.
Yeah, anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, long story short is that from everything that I looked from the highlight reels and everything that I could dig into, about 75% of this bill I like, I support. The problem is that FLS is going to maintain contention that it is a Trojan horse. So I want to see what the Trojan horse is. So I'll leave with that.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Taft.
Great. I feel pretty agnostic on this bill, honestly. I think that as long as America is concerned about having a free and fair democracy, I think it seems fine, right? Like election holiday, making it easier to vote earlier, establishing more standardized voting procedures. They seem all fine. A lot of the nonpartisan, like anti-gerrymandering aspects, they seem fine, as long as they're genuinely, nonpartisan. And in regards like allowing felons to vote, I think that would be the only like really controversial aspect of this bill. Because, I mean, as long as we're not having some kind of Heinleinian democracy where only like, people who've served in the military can vote, as long as we're committed to having everyone vote, I don't think that people who have been previously incarcerated are going to have much worse voting, patterns than the average population. So that seems all right to me. In general, I think it seems like a fine bill. I mean, I think there's much ado about nothing, I think, in some cases, especially regards to both voter suppression and voter fraud. There's been analyses of laws regarding both of these. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of voter suppression or voter fraud that's effective. But, I mean, you may as well clamp down on it anyways, because neither is good.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to CTV to give the correct opinion.
Well, I would have to say, specifically, Jesus, now I'm trying to remember what the fucking topic is.
Freedom to Vote Act.
That's right. But there was something that April said that.
Want me to come back to you?
Yeah, give me a
Okay.
second. The next one, just one,
Okay.
but like because I
Okay.
wanted to reply to April directly.
Got it. I'll bring it over to your protege, Carter.
Wait, what? I already said I support it.
Oh, you're
My
right.
one,
Sorry.
Dylan.
Yeah.
Third slip up today.
Oops.
What's going on?
Okay, well, we're gonna skip Rose Wrist. Let's just be server mute, and you know what? Server deafen too. Make his life harder. Now I'm gonna throw it over to James.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty good as far as, comparative to all the other current legislation we've tried to squeak through for the last 10 years. It doesn't go nearly far enough. Frankly, I find it ludicrous that there are people who are going to complain about things like voting by mail when, the federal government's totally good with like processing 240 million tax returns by mail. They seem to be pretty efficient at it. If everybody purports to want to have a quote democracy and people are involved and have a say in things, you should have more voting, not less. You should have wide open polls. You should have polls that are open longer, not shorter. You should have more voting areas. Like the fact that we make voting so restrictive in this country is like reason number 8,946 why people continuously think that our democracy is constantly shriveling.
Okay. Now I'm gonna throw it over to Fabian.
Okay, I got it now.
Oh, CTV. Okay.
All right, I got it now. Look. April.
Yes.
Specifically with what you're said, I feel like that the least controversial thing in the fucking bill was whether or not people that had served their time, right, for a felony and had gotten out, right, which is the way that I read the bill, would be able to vote. I felt like that was the least controversial thing out of all of it, right? The most controversial thing, though, was how the fucking federal government is going to sit here and give me a piece of legislation that basically says that they can then make all of the fucking rules for this thing, right? We already passed the fucking 19th Amendment. We passed the fucking 21st Amendment. You cannot discriminate among sex, race, fucking what's fucking laid out there, right? I can go get the exact fucking language if I fucking need to, but you all know what the fuck I'm talking about. So, since that's already there, there is no reason for the federal government to be making up all these fucking rules at the federal level for this thing, whenever the 10th Amendment already kicks it back to the fucking states. Now, if you want to give me something that actually fucking like points out a very specific problem, instead of them just making up all of the fucking rules for the thing, right? Because essentially, whatever law that gets passed at the federal level ends up being the standard that ends up being set for state levels all the way the fuck down. And like that right there is a scary fucking thing. Whenever like all I really want at the end of the day is American citizens, if you're a citizen of the United States, being able to fucking vote in this country. That's all I really fucking want. But all the fucking rules, and I didn't really get a chance to go in depth with it because I got the invite fucking about 3 hours before the fucking show started. So I got to do a quick skim over what we were going to be talking about. But that was the big takeaway that I took from it, was that the language that was being used was kind of fucking vague and basically encompassed every fucking situation that you could possibly have for them to be able to fucking set the tone for the thing and then arbitrarily fucking pick and choose where it is they're going to affect the thing. And that right there is a dangerous fucking situation.
So if I can give this sort of progressive response to
This is
this,
open statement.
it would be that like,
Wait, what are you doing?
Opening statement.
oh, sorry.
Okay. So there was someone that I missed.
Yeah, someone.
But actually, I think it's no longer opening statements. I think we can go into
Is that what's going on?
Okay,
Oh,
that's what I
sorry, I'm just-
thought, but
There's two people.
Yeah.
in there.
Wow. Okay. Do you guys see what happened right now? That's
okay.
I'm
You're
being
sorry.
nerfed
Okay.
in
You're
real
right,
time
you're right,
because I'm
you're
out of
right.
control. Okay.
You're right. You're
You
right.
can't handle me.
You're right. Fabian.
Look, so first and foremost, we need to understand what this legislation is. What this legislation is a poison pill that is not designed to pass. I do not think this bill is designed to pass because if you read the bill, right, I only got about 300 pages into it, but if you read the bill, it starts off right off with Congress's findings, right? This is pretty big this is pretty normal for any big piece of legislation. And the first thing the bill does is essentially shit on Republicans and shit on any form of voter ID laws and shit on the fact that anyone that's a felon that's not allowed to vote, that all of this is proof that these laws are systemically racist, right? So by being a Republican voting for this bill, if you are from a state or from a district, right, that has supported voter ID laws in any capacity or supported any of these, you have to admit by your signage of this bill that these are systematic racism, right? So if they were actually trying to, like, that first and foremost is ridiculous and absurd. But more going on. There is a ton of really evil, horrible shit in this bill if you give a fuck about voting in a democracy, which, you know, I'm a fucking anarchist, so at the end of the day, like, most of the time I don't really give a fuck, but this is more election fortification. This is not designed to actually help give more people the right to vote. This is election fortification. And one example I'll give, and I have tons of more examples I can give of all of the horrible, pernicious shit in this bill. But one example I'll give is that gerrymandering, which was decided in 2019 by the Supreme Court case Rucho v. Common Cause decision, was not of the purview of the district courts or of the Supreme Court, because they couldn't find a way to rectify these situations, and they were supposed to be held at the state Supreme Courts when issues of gerrymandering were occurring. Not only does it create a ton of new things that is designed to force states into using what they define as nonpartisan, which means statist elites that are going to support the state. But not only that, if you are an individual that you believe is harmed by it, the only place you can take it up, the only place that you can take gerrymandering court decisions has been moved to the DC District Court. And that's just one example of the sneaky shit that's in this bill that is designed to fortify this election in favor of the Democrats. It's not designed to give people access to the vote. That's the pretty little bullet points you're getting in your summaries of the bill. And if you actually read the bill, there's a fuck ton of weird shit in here, and we'll go into more later. It's fine. It's a poison pill Trojan horse.
Rose.
All right, finally, holy shit. Do you guys see what happened there before? It was real-time nerfing, okay? Dylan just can't handle the Europeans.
Or do you want
It is 4 a.m. and he still cannot wear me down. Anyway, time to get to the actual content. But before that, also, CDV, if you have a problem, say it during the open panel, not in your closing statement. You can hide behind Dylan, okay? Now, what I have to say about the topic, okay? Voting is categorically the most important civil function we have. It is with it that we set the groundwork for pretty much all our other civil, political, and social systems. It is extremely, extremely important, and we should make sure that the functions and the accessibility to that is as open and is as appropriate as it should be within a system that holds democratic elections. If anything, I could even make the argument that it doesn't go far enough in certain departments, so I think the voting holiday is good. I'm personally a proponent of mandatory voting. I think it's probably a good thing that should be punishable with an income scaling fine. But once again, hey, having an election day and a holiday there, it's a great start, and I support it for that. And I just want to point out another thing as well when it comes to like limiting, ID as politics and stuff like that. Sorry, as policies in states. The policy in itself and the free act, what's it called? Free vote, the policy that we're discussing, it actually has like a widening, and it makes it easier potentially for different states to set up ID verification for voting, because now it lengthens and it broadens the types of IDs that could be used and could be recognized for voting. So now we can work with a student ID, a passport, a hunting and fishing license, a bank card, utility bill, or snap identification card. So if anything, it broadens the ability to do that if that's something that needs to be done. When it comes to using IDs for vote in general, I think it probably would be fine if the United States of America had like a federally issued ID that is given to everybody, everyone who's eligible to vote. That doesn't seem to be the case right now, so therefore I'm against it, because it just seems to be an arbitrary blockage towards people's right to enact their democratic will. That doesn't seem to stop anything significant when it comes to voter fraud.
Okay, it looks like it can be open panel. This is the last topic.
Rose, guess what?
What up?
Oh boy.
You ready? It's happening. Let's go. You finally. We're
This
round
is-
3 in, and now you speak up.
I don't know what you thought was going to happen, right? But this is the last time you speak without Dylan having to cover for you. You know how? I don't know why.
Dylan's covering for me. Is that what you think is happening right now? You think Dylan is helping me out?
If you would just figure it out, do you know how? I know why?
Thanks
I
for
have no
being
idea what the
here in
fuck
the
you're
chat.
saying.
Right.
I'll see
You don't
you.
know how why, because as soon as you about to start speaking to begin with, I'm going to
Ushi,
overtalk
hello?
you every
What are you
single
talking
time.
about?
That way you're forced into the position where Dylan is going to be covering for you and have to server mute me every single time you want to speak. That's what you get for saying some dumb shit.
How many times have you been server muted in this debate?
What are you going to do? 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 What are you gonna do?
I'm just gonna sit here in
It's
silence.
gonna be like this for the rest of the fucking hour. Anybody else want to go? James, jump in there. Go ahead.
This is a good discussion on the Vote Act. James, do you want to speak?
I just like to say that you know, CTV, man, I love you. You are the meme du jour, but you know, like, tell me you've literally read 0 pages of the bill without actually telling me you've read 0 pages of the bill.
No, I was honest. I got the invite 3 hours beforehand, right?
Oh,
So I
okay.
came in here. I read the summary
cool,
of the fucking bill, right? I kind of got a fucking good feel for it. Like the language in there is kind of fucking loose. What I read from the summary, right? And it seems like it's going to end up giving a lot of executive power to the federal government, right, for them to be able to legislate some shit and completely take the states out of the voting process, which is not where I think that the direction that we need to be going. I think that the 17th Amendment 19th Amendment, and I believe it's the 21st or 22nd amendments going there, enforce the no discrimination. I think that's a good place from where our federal government was originally framed. But somehow not passing a constitutional amendment in this case, considering we have the constitutional amendment of the 10th that kicks us back to the states, clearly, just for me, from a framework standpoint, makes it unconstitutional.
Well, it's so.
What about Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution?
Yeah, 1.4 says that they have the right for the time, place, and manner, right? And this has been over and over again reaffirmed by the Supreme Court that they basically can do this. Now, the one thing that they can't do, which is a ton of the gerrymandering legislation that they've added in, that they're coming down from Congress, especially when trying to force things into the district court. This is a direct violation of the Constitution that needs to be challenged. That being said, I never signed a constitution. The Constitution is just a piece of fucking paper that is forced upon me with violence.
You
but if we're
fucking
gonna
took
make
an
sovereign
oath to
citizen?
it, you fucking prick. All right, you took an oath to it.
I can wipe my ass with that piece of paper. It's meaningless. I never
You took a
signed it.
fucking oath.
I didn't know you were a sovereign citizen, dude.
I mean, I'm forced to obey by the rules via the threat of violence. That being said, there's a ton of other things that are wrong in this bill. But instead of going into additional things that I'd like to talk about that are wrong, I'll just engage with what Rose Riss said, right? Which is that it's a good thing that voter ID laws are now expanded so that people can use student IDs, hunting licenses, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to combine this too with what Stardust was saying, that it's a good thing that we have same-day voter registration. What these things do is complicate the process. They make it more difficult to validate who is voting legitimately and who isn't voting legitimately. And it makes it more and more difficult to be able to. It's the same thing with the regulations on whether or not we purge voter rolls. This legislation has made it incredibly difficult to purge voter rolls of people that have moved from place to place. And what this does is when you have all of this bloat, you can have additional instances of voter fraud. That being said, there's nothing fucking wrong with voter ID. The idea that voter ID disenfranchises voters is a complete bullshit fucking myth. Anybody can go to a fucking DMV and register to vote, and in almost every state, it's 30 days is the distance. So I don't understand why you guys are making the racist argument, or if you're saying that this is disenfranchising to blacks, or if you think it's just disenfranchising to the poor, the classist argument that somehow these people don't have the capacity to go to fucking DMV or whatever your institution
Literally
is.
nobody said
If
that.
I can
Dude,
jump
so
in,
you're
if I
talking
can
at
jump
ghost
in,
right now.
Wait,
I call dibs.
wait,
I call
stop.
dibs.
Okay, you called dibs.
I gotta go
Well,
after you,
you're
Stardust.
libertarian.
They call up
Okay.
with me and Stardust. They
Everybody
call up me
just
and
shut the fuck up, okay? Look, so Fabian, was that all you wanted to say? Because people jumped down your throat pretty quickly.
I'm gonna let everyone attack me, and then I'll just bring out more shit because I actually read portions.
I'm gonna write down Star, then Ty.
Wait, I was
then
called out.
Rose.
Okay, there we go.
Then Taft.
Very reluctant.
In that order, and CTV. Okay. And it seems that James, okay, and James, and I'll just write down Carter because why not?
Just write down everybody.
Okay.
Stardust.
So yes. So I don't think I said anything about ID. Fabian, I don't know where you got that from. The only thing that I said was that I think it's great
say that.
that. Okay. All right. Well, great. Then you can take back what you said about me saying stuff about things being racist then too.
I didn't call you out by name. I said.
Wait, who said that? Who said the racist thing?
Who said that though?
Who said
So
it?
you can just admit
You
that you're wrong
specific-
then.
I'm not going to admit that
about
I'm
what
wrong.
you said.
Who made that? Who made the argument that it's racist?
Okay, you know what? You know what? You don't have to admit that you're wrong. I'll admit that you're wrong for you. Don't worry about it.
I already had an inoculation.
I'm the
before
least
what it was
racist
that
person
I said.
here.
And I said
just need to
anyone
say
that is
that.
making this argument, and then I said the same thing
That
about a
makes you
class
suspect, though,
argument.
Carter.
Wait,
right?
who
So the
on the
fact that
panel has
I
made that
didn't say
argument?
anything about class.
The
I didn't
fact
say
that you
anything about
can't
race.
listen,
Okay,
Okay,
Fabio.
Stop. Okay, we're gonna go one at a time. Okay. As much as I like a mess and this cat fight between Fabian and Star, I'm gonna let Fabio. Okay.
Yeah.
So Fabian, I'm gonna let you finish since the accusation that you accuse her of this. Okay,
Like I
accusation.
already said it. It's very clear. I inoculated before I said it. Anyone making this argument is what I said before that. And then she believes that she was
Really?
personally attacked. That because I guess she's a narcissist and she thinks the world's revolved around her. But I didn't call you out by name and I didn't call your idea out.
You did
specifically.
name me though. Okay. Well, anyways, you did
You
name
named
me
me as well, but I
in
didn't say
talking
that.
about. Shut up, Rose Wrist. My time.
sorry,
Okay. You did name me. In reference to this whole voting ID thing, which I never brought up. But what I did bring up is that I do think it's great that there's same-day voter registration. I have no problem with voter ID being required to register. No problem, my dude. But I think being able to register for voting the same day, online, and other means, I think that's excellent. Such a great thing. Also, allowing felons to vote, that's so awesome. I understand that it makes people uneasy that there's a lot of state powers that I guess are kind of going to be less now. I do think that voting is one of the most important things that we do as citizens. So I think it's very important that we do things that protect and expand people's ability to vote. And that means that there are more resources to serve voters who may have disabilities or voters who are overseas, that mail-in voting is more available to a lot of people. I think that that's great. I don't see what the issue is here, but I don't appreciate the idea that somehow I'm endorsing voter ID or not voter ID, because I do think that some ID should probably be allowed. But I don't like this idea that I am doing that because I'm calling it racist or classist. What I would say is racist or classist is probably the felony, people with felonies not being able to vote. So
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna throw this over to Tiberius.
All
right,
you
so-
stated your position.
Okay,
and then
so-
put things in my mouth. I thought
FLS, it's my turn. Shut the fuck up. God damn it. All right, anyway.
Put things in my mouth. Don't put shit in my mouth.
Oh, for fuck's sake, children. All right, so same-day registration voter ID laws. I actually do take the voter ID seriously, even though there's not a lot of cases of voter fraud, is that on one side of that, I absolutely do want to make sure that people have IDs that are verifiable, that when they're voting, that they're voting in a responsible manner, that kind of thing, right? I don't have a problem with that, but what I do have a problem with if Republicans are going to mandate that people have voter IDs, and they're going to have to be, to some level of degree, you have to or there's a difficulty to prove competency, right? Then let's make it to where we supply the voter IDs. These can't be that expensive. We can put them through the mail, just like your tax returns. It'll work out really well.
They're free in almost every state. They're free in literally almost every state.
They seem to have some really big issues in the South, man.
No.
It's kind of weird.
No,
I don't know.
No, it's not. They're literally free in almost every state. You can't get a driver's license for free, but you can get an ID card for free in almost every state in America.
Also,
Okay,
there's a difference
all right.
between having it provided to you and having to go and collect it. That's fairly significant.
Yeah, there's some details in there, but yeah, you could totally literally put up
What the fuck do you think the difference is? Sorry, Tiberius. There's
actually a difference in there. But going there, standing in line for some places fucking 3 hours is a pain in the goddamn balls versus literally, hey, here's my Facebook picture, here's my ID, or here's my details, please send it to me in the mail, I'll see you in 30 days. There is some ways that we can do this a little bit better and smarter. Absolutely.
Yeah, you get a paper copy in most states the day of.
Yeah. So, the one other thing I'll say regarding FLS is, Okay, so voter IDs are free. That's interesting because does anyone know that? I don't know it. I got to get a driver's license. Does anyone know that they actually can get those IDs? Which is a problem.
Apparently not. I thought it was common knowledge, but apparently not. I don't know.
I don't think it is.
That's pretty important before you put
No,
legislation.
you just have to pay for other forms of ID that you need to prove who you are to then get the quote free voter ID.
Yeah, I mean, if you're homeless, it can be an issue.
Oh, well,
right?
that,
there's
oh, okay.
Right,
So,
like,
so you don't have to pay for
those.
voting ID, you just have to pay for the ID to get the voting ID.
Right,
Cool.
like there's this extremely small subset of the population that can have some difficulty getting the voter ID if they're a transient individual, and it's difficult for them to prove that they are living in the state. But like a PO box or a bill is pretty much all you need.
I just want to bring up this study coming out of the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's done by the Harvard Business School, and it indicates.
Can you bring that up after Rose, since you're after Rose?
I just have a really quick thing to say, and I'll throw it back over to you. Very simple principle for this, okay? Voting is super important. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We don't see significant voter fraud. Therefore, all that putting more restrictions, no matter how menial they're really going to be, is it will, in some sense, because it's affecting a lot of people, it will cause some people to not vote when they otherwise would have been able to, which otherwise is it's not a price worth paying, given that voter fraud does not occur in a significant capacity whatsoever. So this basic principle, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm going to send it back over to Deft.
Yeah, and just to support what Rose Rist is saying, this paper finds that strict ID requirements had no effect on actual or perceived voter fraud. So when we look at this bill and its increased restrictions on voter ID laws, they seem fine for me. I mean, honestly, voter ID laws don't seem to have a big effect overall, especially not on fraud. So if we're increasing restrictions on how they're implemented, fine. I don't really think there's a reason to implement voter ID laws, but if a state insists on implementing them, we may as well have some restrictions to make sure they're not the most egregious kind that they can be. That seems pretty reasonable to me.
Next is CTV.
Okay, so I'm glad you guys brought up Article 1, Section 4 of our Constitution. I'm going to be honest, too. I'm surprised to hear Rose make the argument that he did.
Positive or negative surprise?
Shut the fuck up! I didn't want to hear your voice just because I mentioned your fucking name, you prick. Okay, now. So I'm surprised at the argument, considering it was a conservative argument, even though it used liberal justification. I don't give a fuck what the justification is, so long as you fucking end up agreeing with me, right? So the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places and choosing of senators. Now, this is where, if we didn't already have the 17th Amendment on the books, right, where it literally took the vote away from the state legislature and placed it directly in the hands of the people, which was specifically what the House of Representatives vote was specifically supposed to do, and that the state senate or the senators were chosen by the state legislature's representatives that were chosen by the individual, then if the 17th Amendment wasn't already in place, then perhaps, right, there might be an argument for the type of legislation that Congress would have put in place now. But the fact of the matter is that because the 17th Amendment has already been put into place, right, and senators are voted via direct popular vote by the people because of the 17th Amendment, it really puts into question what I would call a constitutional quandary when it comes to the election of individuals, because now this legislation would not only serve to circumvent, right, the states' rights, but also, right, introduce a real fucking problem because the 17th Amendment is already in place.
Wait, Dylan, hold on. You're a mover and shake. Do you think you could tell, like, your people in the U.S. government that CTV on the hippy dippy debate panel has figured out something that is unconstitutional, and they can send it over to the Supreme Court so they can actually look at it? Because everybody fucking missed this except for CTV, it seems. So just
the Supreme
get
Court
that
already
memo.
tunes into CTV streams. They just can't admit it.
Okay, I see. Well, then hopefully we'll see the Supreme Court pick up that alleged unconstitutional.
So do my orbs,
practice
actually.
in
My
fact,
fucking time, prick, and I'm going to remember what I said at the beginning of the thing. As soon as you start taking, I'm going to go ahead and just start speaking again. I tried to give you a chance, you fucked it up.
Well, you gotta let me moderate and throw it over to James.
I'm letting you moderate.
Now. Thank you very much.
So even though I shockingly and somewhat painfully agree with Fabian on some things, I got to push back heavy on the whole, everything's fine. It's just a small percentage of people who can't get ID. Oh, voting's only inconvenient for a couple of people. It seems like it's not people who look like Fabian or live near Fabian, but just other people, which always seems to be the convenient way to poo-poo things here in the United States of America. I'm saying that you seem to think that there's no hassle to getting an ID or going to vote. So obviously,
no, I just wanted to call you out for your racism.
Oh, no, I'm saying where you live, that there are obviously... No, there are obviously multiple DMVs and open voting establishments everywhere, and people can just go get IDs and vote willy-nilly for free. It's like crypto land over there. It's like paradise.
What fucking world are you living in where there's these massive amounts of people in America that have this super difficult time getting an ID? Where are these people?
Okay, to start with, anybody who
like
loses
in Appalachia maybe or something.
Well, are you going to ask me a question, then keep interrupting me, or I don't know? You're going to maybe let me answer the fucking question.
Answer the fucking question. Go for it.
You sure? You're gonna let me finish the whole fucking sentence?
I will. I will mute him if you want me to.
Oh, so please do. You'd be doing us all a favor on this one.
Okay, continue, James.
Okay. So apparently you are judging the entirety of the country solely by your own experiences or by one other person's limited experiences and not everybody's. This is a very wide, diverse nation. It's filled with many rural places in many states where there are no free IDs and you have to pay even to get a non-driver ID from the DMV, which of course you have to drive like fucking 3 hours to, because in a lot of states there's like 4 of them in the whole goddamn state. Like, you got to stop thinking, like, if your voting situation is good, it does not mean that the voting situation of 300 million other people is good. And frankly, if you're, I get the whole being against voting thing. I get it from the anarchist perspective. But even from the collectivist perspective of everybody should have a voice, well, then in this fucked up system, as fucked up as it is, you should still want as many people as possible to vote.
So,
and
again,
have a voice be heard.
What state, can you name one state where there is a place where you have to drive 3 hours to a place to get an ID and it costs you money? Can you please name one state?
Yeah, I grew up there. I grew up in Idaho. Yeah, I drove 2.5 hours to the DMV to pay $65.
How many DMVs are in Idaho?
Wait, have you ever tried to make it Orlando on I-4? Are you shitting me? to get there? Are you fucking shitting me?
Transportation, by the way, American infrastructure, American highways. That's
shut the fuck up, Rose.
Stop, everybody else, shut up. No, there's no. You're not holding on me. Are you trying to hold on me?
No, I was trying to finish for Fabian. Fabian asked a question. I'm answering it.
Okay.
Sorry, there are 44 DMVs in Idaho.
You're right.
44.
And there's also parts of Idaho that are like 60 miles from and you have to drive through dirt roads. Like, I grew up there. I grew up like 20 miles from the nearest like grocery store, or gas station, or anything. I grew up literally in the woods.
Okay, so if you're that far out, how far did you have to drive to go vote?
Well, I moved away before I had to vote. So
just curious.
Like, they voted at the church. I'm pretty sure my family did. So I think it's like an hour. I think they had to drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are somewhere in the country with 44 DMVs aren't enough, and in the entire year leading up, you went around with no ID in any capacity, and you had to drive multiple hours to go to a DMV, and for whatever reason, it had to be done last minute so that you could register to vote, and then you still have to drive an hour to vote.
Yeah, a lot of people don't find out until like a month before the election that they've been kicked off a voter roll. It happens. It's called reality, not the place where you live, where seemingly everybody gets tons of notification.
Mistakes
Everybody
happen.
can vote, and ID is
Sure.
free.
Mistakes happen, sure, but the overwhelming majority of the reason that voter rolls get purged is because people end up on multiple voter rolls because they move. Right.
So then what you're saying is there should be a robust system in place where even if people have recently moved, they can still get an ID and the right to vote very quickly and not have to spend money on it. Thank you very much. That is a salient point.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you ought to be able to get same-day voter registration and bloat the systems that you already show because their government systems have inefficiencies baked into them. And this bill has tons of extra things that make it more difficult to do this process. More regulations and more federal mandates that come in that are going to make these systems even less efficient.
Are you in favor of voter ID then, or are you not in favor of voter ID?
Between 1 day and 5 days, so Fabian, what's the difference between 1 and 5 or 10 fucking days? What's the difference? If you have the documentation necessary to prove that you're a citizen of the United States, what the fuck does the number of days matter as a part of the argument?
This allows them to be able to go through the system before the election occurs and make sure that there hasn't been any fraud, that there hasn't been any issues, that there aren't people that are in multiple districts. This allows them to clean up the voter rolls and figure out what's going on, or to have everyone registered ahead of time.
Straight. Hold on. So let me get this straight. You think that because the government has a problem with organizing its fucking voter rolls, that somehow that the 1 or 5 or 10 day hold that you would put on the American citizen from making the registration to vote should be fucking withheld so that the government can do the fucking what is probably going to amount to a fucking half-assed attempt at trying to do the things that you would hope that they would do? That's just me being honest, right?
It's a question of good, better, best, right? I'm against voting and using your power to enforce violence against people that lose your vote anyways. That being said, it's a question of good, better, best. And if you make things happen on the same day, you overcomplicate the process.
American citizen you're looking to restrict. Give me a fucking break. It's an American citizen that you're looking to fucking restrict in this scenario. When it comes to illegal immigration or illegal aliens, I got no problems. And whenever there's inherent fucking problems with them not having the documentation necessary to prove that they're an American citizen ahead of time, then sure, you put a fucking weight on their shit. When an American citizen fucking does it, right? And
this bill is literally doing that.
Necessary to prove that. There's no reason for a 10-day wait on an American citizen.
Yes, there is. So that you don't have the issue that you just fucking showed.
You're fucking kidding me, bro.
So that you have proper identification and so that they have time to
all of the
But if they bring proper identification,
they got a fucking ID, they got the fucking third, they have everything necessary to be able to prove that they're an American
why
citizen.
Are we punishing
me that they should still be a 10 fucking day wait? Give me a break.
Why are we punishing citizens for? Well, no, I mean that's what it seems like.
Voting is a punishment on the people that lose.
Okay.
Wait, I have a very simple. Wait, so you say that same day voter registration leads to fraudulent or insecure elections or voter fraud or something of the sort? Do you have any pros I can look at these?
I'm saying it complicates the process.
But does that complication?
You know what also complicates the process? Multiple IDs.
I need to run through this. Okay, so do these complications you speak of? Do they actually manifest into any real outcomes that we can see statistically happening, or?
Look, what I'm saying is that
that was an easy question.
Rose, shut the fuck up and let someone answer your question. What I'm saying is when you take one thing and you isolate it from a 700-page bill, right? Then you say look, the idea that it creates more avenues for people to commit voter fraud, in the fact that voter fraud hasn't ever been proven to be a widespread or to being overturning elections in and of itself anyways, that one thing, right, seems like a very simple thing. But when you have a 700-page bill that is tacking on multiple layers of insecurities within our election in the name of stopping racism, it's an issue.
So the answer to my question is no, you have no evidence of this actually manifesting itself into statistical outcomes.
That's not what I said. I said that you.
Yeah, you're right. That's not what you said because you didn't answer my question whatsoever.
Rose, no, I don't need you to defend me with your inane ramblings. What I said was that there's no evidence that you can find widespread voter fraud that has overturned major elections. Voter fraud exists. And making it easier for voter fraud to occur. Like, I don't have the exact study that I can put in the
But
chat.
you
for
said
right
that specifically same-day
Trying to talk, I
voting
know you're trying to talk.
complicates
Hide
it
behind
No,
Dylan.
and
Hide behind
makes
Dylan.
it
Hide
so
behind
that
Dylan. Hide behind
okay,
Dylan.
you
Hide behind
said
Dylan.
specifically that
Yes, you don't need a study for
but
that.
hold on,
It's
you said
obvious.
specifically that same-day voting is going to complicate things and it's going to lead to like negative outcome. Obviously, that's the implication. If it complicates things but doesn't lead to any like demonstrable outcomes, then why the fuck do we care about it? There's no reason to care about it. So I'm asking you where you have that perception from. Where do you have the perception that same-day voting will lead to this type of outcome? Do you have any evidence, or are you just pulling this out of your ass?
I'm not pulling it out of my ass, you disingenuous fuck. Listen, what I'm saying is we're not debating the same-day registration voting bill. We're debating a 700-page bill, or 529 if you have a different PDF copy, right? And this bill has a ton of things that can add up to additional issues or fortification, if you prefer that term. Now,
Okay, so we
what
move
I'm
off
saying
the
is,
single-day voting thing then, yeah?
no,
wanna focus
you
on the other
can't. You
stuff?
can't isolate individual things and then say that it's not a problem when it obviously increases the likelihood for insecurity.
But you can't
It
name a bunch
does
of
so
stuff, but
by
then fail to
definition.
substantiate any one of them when you go
I'm
and
not
talk about
failing
them
to
specifically.
substantiate it. How fucking stupid
You provide
are
no
you?
evidence.
It's literally logic. Do you have any?
Yeah, I'm
If you-
totally
if you-
lost. It
if
seems like you're just
everyone fucking-
conjecture. Like,
It's not
True.
speculation.
fucking conjecture. It's so
True.
fucking obvious. If
Well,
you have
here's
a
the thing,
process with a
Fabio.
limited amount of resources and people, and then you have to add voter registration onto that process at the exact same day, you have
already a
limited the
thing.
same resources and you have made it easier for these situations to occur. It is logic. You don't need a fucking statistical fucking analysis of what percentage it is. If you did that, you could know how damning that one individual thing is in a univariate analysis. But again, we're not doing a univariate analysis. We're doing a 700-page bill that has all kinds of fucked up shit in it, and we're just using basic fucking logic. If you guys
I have a simple
don't
question
have
for
that
you then.
basic
Maybe,
logic,
Okay,
then
wait,
I don't
wait,
know
wait,
where
wait,
we're
got it,
going.
we got it.
sorry.
Okay, I gotta stop this. Carter's been waiting for a while, and I saw him raise his hand a second ago. So I want to throw it over to Carter.
I think I'm actually like reading it right now, part of it, and there's like a breakdown of it. I think the best part of the bill, we're talking about voter ID and all of that, is that they want to enable like essentially you can register online to vote by proof of identification via tax, whatever form, some way to prove where you live, where you are last year, whatever. I think they have that in parts of Europe. I'm not sure.
No,
where
it's
you can
totally a
register-
good part of the bill.
So where you can just do it online and it requires you're born with the ID, right? And I think any deregulation of voting is better than anything. And I agree that with anybody here who has said that like less voter ID is better, because the more voter ID, like the less people who participate in your democracy. I don't think there's any other better way to say it. The bill may be convoluted and have a bunch of shit in it, but I think no matter what you're going to end up at, it's better. Also, I read who supports the bill, and it's Manchin, so he's a hero.
Okay, I got throw it over to Tiberius, and then Stardust.
Yeah, so FLS, I actually do appreciate intuitive and logical, rationales for this. So, I'm not going to be like, oh my god, I need to see the study before I make a conclusion. I'm not a consequentialist. So here's the thing I'll break down with you, because I get even your main concern and I agree with it. But on the other side of that is there's ways we can get ahead of this game. We can send out the voter rolls 3 months at a time. It's like, hey, we're making sure to confirm that you are on the voter roll. If you don't have it by certain amount of date, then obviously you're going to want to have to check in. Basic shit like this. Administration isn't hard. Well, okay, it seems to be hard for a lot of people, but I'm a nerd. Anyway, long story short here, we can do this the right way or we can do this the wrong way. We can be like, hey, look, we give you 3 weeks to vote ahead of time. So if you want to do that, you can. We ship out mail-in ballots 2 months ahead of time. So you've got plenty of time to do your shit, send it back in. We'll put it in a nice box and count it on election day. Either of that shit works. But all of this where it's just like, no, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to change anything. This fucking shit sucks, man. We're better than this. We can literally do a slow rolling census every time we have an election now if you want to integrate it. I'm done. Losing my brain cells here.
I'll just in response.
Yeah, so you know
fine
what?
if
So,
it's one at a
fuck you,
time.
Rose Rish. You had to hide behind Dylan in order to get your fucking voice out.
I didn't
How's
ask
that
him.
feel?
He stepped in
How's that feel,
independently.
you
That was an
bitch?
act of
How's it
love from
feel?
Dylan right
How's
there.
it feel? How's it feel?
I didn't ask him. He
I'm
stepped
glad
in
you know how it
independently.
feels right now. That's right. That's right. Fabian, you were going to say something.
Do you remember last time we had a debate where you had to kick me from the call
I don't
CTV?
even know, you're
remember what
trying to
happened?
talk, and you said a thing at the beginning of the thing that prevents you from being allowed to talk. So, Fabian, go ahead.
Can we not?
guys are
I
oppressing
actually
me right
cede
now.
my
You're
time to
oppressing
Rose
me.
Risk, no matter how mad
don't
I
give a
am.
fuck. If you're going to start doing that shit, then we can do that shit too.
Okay,
How's
well,
that?
CDB,
Being
you know,
oppressed in real time.
keep
I
acting
think
like
it's
this, I'll
Rose
have to mute
Risk's
you.
turn to speak. I cede my time to him.
Look, I
It
just
is
gotta
actually
prove that.
Stardust. It's actually Stardust's time to speak at the moment.
Yeah, go on,
Well,
Stardust.
I wanted to hear
Stardust.
what Fabio was gonna say.
No, I was just saying, I think that certain provisions in this bill are good provisions. And I don't think that, and I don't think that if we individually look at them, right, and have an argument about how they work individually, that they're a bad idea to pass one thing, see what happens in an election, see how it works, and make these incremental changes to make things better. I think being able to go online, right, is perfectly fine, especially if you're showing some IDs so that you can prove that you are the person that you are, so that apparently the 44 DMVs in Idaho aren't enough, and you got to drive 3 hours. That sucks. That's like making it fucking difficult, right? I think there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that sorry, it wasn't, and I apologize. It's not actually 44. It's 44 counties that have
How's
them
it
in
going?
regardless. So I mean, like, and I don't necessarily think that a lot of, like, I really don't have much skin in the game when it comes to certain specific instances of changing and fixing things. The problem that I have with this bill is that it's obviously a poison pill because of the way that it is written. It's extremely judgmental in calling these things systemic racism, as a matter of fact, that basically makes it unable for a Republican from a Republican state to vote for it anyways. So, and the fact that they know that they're not going to be able to get this passed in the Senate because they couldn't get the past two previous versions passed in the Senate unless they get rid of the filibuster. They did this shit on purpose. They did it on purpose, and they put these poison pills in the bill so that they can go back home to their election and say, look at these Republicans, they're racist and they won't let you vote. It's not about actually passing this bill. One of the examples of something that's fucking horrible in this bill is that it actually establishes a new chain of custody in the way that the paper ballots will be.
Okay, so I turned them way down. And it's really funny.
Cannot be done and makes it illegal for any state, let's say Maricopa County,
because it's like
or something, to be able to.
He's really quiet and yelling.
Only
and I'm doing ASMR.
The Elections Assistance Committee. And if you know anything about the Elections Assistance Committee, unlike me, I had to fucking read up about it. I was like, what the fuck is this? Right?
Yeah, so it's like, damn, crazy.
They handle the assets. However, they're giving them additional power in investigating voter fraud. And this is a company that the Office of the Inspector General's office said that they were allocating resources appropriately because they had to settle out of court for firing people and not hiring people because they said that they were Republican. They will only hire Democrats and will actually fire Republicans. And these are the people that are going to be in charge of investigating, having the sole rights of investigating because of chain of custody changes. Like there's poison pills in this bill that make it impossible for any Republican to be able to vote for this bill. And it's not designed for it to pass. It's designed to be used as a cudgel to call Republicans racist and not actually talk about issues or fix anything. If we want to fix something, take something like making voting day a national holiday and just make that a bill in and of itself. And I think most people would vote for it, and that would be good change. But that's not what they're doing.
So I can see how certain, oh crap, I accidentally clicked on something. I can see how certain words like make a lot of people upset. But I think when you look at an issue that affects a certain group disproportionately, I don't think it's wrong for them to acknowledge that this is the reason why we're proposing this bill, because there is an issue here that affects a group disproportionately. I do see that, using the word racial discrimination in systems can be divisive. But if we kind of like separate racism from structural racism and view them as two different things like they are, then we I think we avoid that problem. But I think most people don't have the understanding of that. And then secondly, I would say, like, I understand what you're saying here about us needing to look at the bill as a whole versus looking at it individually. And maybe I'm just not understanding this. Maybe I am misunderstanding or something. But it seems like you yourself were getting super caught up on individual things. within
No,
this bill.
I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to respond to individual things that people are supporting.
Okay, well,
and then showing the issues of those individual things.
Okay, sure, but like for example, the same day voter registration, there's still processes to make sure that the people registering are citizens and that they're legitimate. And if you run into issues where you see a duplicate vote or something, then you can fix that. But that happens after registration and after voting.
And one of the ways that you fix that is by having like a waiting period so that you can make sure that everything is clean before the election.
I think honestly, the ability to vote for me trumps any concerns I have about a duplicate vote because somebody moved or something like that. I think that it's a higher priority in my mind that people have the ability to vote, even if that's registering last minute, than it is for us to be so concerned that we are installing a waiting period, because we already do this. We check the votes after the voting has occurred. I don't see why we need to change that.
I have a question. Do you have an issue?
You got a question? I got a question too.
Okay,
Oh
that's
my God,
phenomenal.
Are you sure?
Let's take it.
If he wants to make a declarative statement at the beginning of the fucking debate, right, then he has to answer for the consequences.
So it's very simple, CTV. What I talked about at the beginning was if you have a substantive disagreement with anything I say, you should bring it up during the panel, not just ramble over me like a petulant child. But that's okay. So FL Scott, when you were talking about the systemic racism thing
that you made to begin with, right? That's all you can do. You can stand by it, or
okay.
Is this a functioning hippy dip? Is this how all the other 51 ones have been on that I haven't been on?
You're just simply resting on fucking Dylan Burns' moderation right now, which was your declarative statement.
Jesus
so if you're going to
Christ.
make a declarative statement like that, you got to understand that there are in fact consequences for your actions, sir. This is a part
Is this
of
how all your
growing
panels
up.
go, Dylan, or
This
have I
is a
just
part
like
of
been
joining
uniquely
the
successful in
greater
stirring up CDV here?
society as far as maturity and growth, right? I'm just trying to help you along this road, right? This is a lesson you're going to have to learn the hard way.
CDV, you gotta let him speak, okay?
Is this how all the other 51s have been on that I haven't been on?
Do you rescind your declarative statement?
My declarative statement was in regards to you having a substantive disagreement with any one of my arguments.
Rescinded, yes or no?
It doesn't matter if it was rescinded or not.
It matters to me.
Well, yeah, but I'll have to moderate, and you don't want me to...
know, and so what he'd be doing is resting on your moderation instead.
Yeah,
of having
you
to
can live knowing that, but he does not need to accept that.
That's all right. If you're
okay, we gotta move on. We only got like a few more minutes anyway. Okay.
It looks like Fabian wants something to say.
Well, Fabian, no, I gotta go to Rose. I'm sorry, Rose.
I will try.
Started reading.
Stand by a statement though. I gotta know.
Yeah, he doesn't want to respond.
I'm not gonna back off my statement because what you're doing right now has nothing to do with my original statement.
You can fucking stand behind Dylan Burns' moderation so you can be able to talk. I don't know what to tell you.
Have we ever seen CDV this riled up?
Have you ever decided to like make
this is not unique. This is vodka talking. This is not unique.
Okay,
this is just the vodka talking.
What?
All right, I see.
Okay.
So you understand what was getting in here when you walked in the room?
We're just doing that. I'm sorry, but Rose, say what you want to say.
Okay, great. So, FL Scott, when it comes to you seem to take issue with the putting this from like talking about the voter suppression thing from a marginalized person's perspective. Is your issue with that because you think it's like disingenuous political theater, or is the issue with that you don't believe there's any merit to that piece of analysis?
Yes, I mean, obviously I'm going to take umbrage with classifying people and racism through that, but that's a whole nother conversation of why I have issue with, Marxist philosophy and cultural, and we'll say critical theory and critical race theory and things like that bring these ideas to the forefront of our philosophy. But putting all of that aside and my issues with that aside, I think that the problem here is that there's easily other ways to frame this, and in that obviously if you were actually trying to get a Republican to vote for this, you wouldn't start your bill off with findings that accuse anything that they've done in the past of systemic racism, right? What you would do is you would say that certain individuals, in certain communities, yada yada yada, have a harder time, getting access to the vote, or yada yada. Like, it doesn't matter, right? But they specifically say that it is racist to not allow felons to vote because felons are disproportionately black, and this is more proof of systemic racism. And they cite that in the beginning.
I mean, it is proof of systemic racism, isn't it?
That's not wrong.
It is.
Right? It's not.
Wait,
not.
So you do not think it's proof of systemic racism? Wait, do you or do you not think it's proof of systemic racism?
It is not proof of systemic racism.
It's not proof. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a set of very simple questions, and we'll see where this gets us. So, do you think the historical treatment of Black Americans in the United States of America, when it comes to Jim Crow and the history of slavery, or whatever, has had a downward pressure on their ability to accumulate wealth in this country, or in the country of the United States? Do you think it's affecting them contemporarily?
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
excellent. So when it comes to issues of like voter suppression, when it comes to who's going to be more likely to be caught on the fringes of not being able to vote because of more of these restrictions, do you think it's going to be people higher or lower on the economic ladder?
I don't think that you can extrapolate from historical examples of systemic racism from a process that is so simple to do that it easily could be cured in one generation.
So I'm going to rephrase the question. Do you think it's people higher or lower on the economic ladder that are going to suffer disproportionately when it comes to being like locked out?
I don't think anyone's suffering from voter suppression if all they have to do is go get an ID.
Okay, so you don't believe that there will be any people
deny the
caught in that?
premise of the question in and of itself.
Unless
Okay,
they're
so what about
felons,
the
right?
what about the felon thing, for instance? Do you believe it's going to be disproportionately people that are okay? I guess
Again, that's not suffering. That's laid out
in
the Constitution that they can do that. Now, do I personally agree with it? No. But to say that it is somehow an imposed racist thing when it's
okay. No,
part
hold on.
of the
Okay,
framing
so
of the Constitution.
So simple question. So you don't think
can
there's a
do that to
significant
felons.
difference in whether or not the people on higher up on the socioeconomic ladder or lower on the socioeconomic ladder get caught up by more voter restrictions and end up not being able to vote? Do you think it's like equal?
I'm sorry. Can you slow down just a second and
Do poor people have a harder time voting?
Voting or not? Do you think poor people would be
I don't think
disproportionately
anyone
affected?
has a. I don't think
You're not
anyone
answering
has
my question. Do you think they're going to be disproportionately
right,
affected, or do
because
you think
you're
everyone across the
trying
board
to
is affected?
rephrase a question with a
I'm not
premise that I
rephrasing a
don't
question.
agree with.
I
don't agree with the premise of
your
your
really
question.
paranoid.
Okay,
You're really
I'm not
paranoid. Okay, I'm
paranoid.
asking you a very simple question. Okay, do you
No,
believe that
I am
these voter
not
restrictions will
going to answer a question that requires that I agree with the presupposition that is in the question in and of itself. If you don't understand
okay,
that,
we're getting
I
there.
don't
If
know
you
how to help
disagree
you.
with that, we can get at that by the end of it. But right now, I've asked you one question. You agreed to that, and now I'm just on the second question. You shouldn't be afraid of this.
I'm
This is
not.
very
I'm
simple.
not afraid
Do you
of it.
believe
Stop
that
telling me
voter
that-
restriction
Shut the fuck up.
disproportionately affects poor people? Or
You're not going to
Okay.
listen. I don't agree that voter suppression is a thing that
All
can
right, Dylan, I
occur
give up.
in
You
this
can't answer
situation.
simple
So
All
questions.
you have to do
I
is
don't know
go
what
get
to
a
say.
fucking ID.
Okay,
This is the guy that said logic
Rose,
before, by the way. You
Rose,
can't answer simple
Rose,
questions.
Rose just said
My
you
bad.
gave up, so I got to throw
I
it to
did.
Carter.
I'm sorry.
Then I'm
Okay.
going to throw it to Star,
Scott.
then Taft, and then we're wrapping up for the night.
I don't know if this is Rose's question, but do you think poor people have a harder time voting? That's it.
I think poor people have a harder time voting.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what you call poor or anything. Do you think people with financial troubles have a harder time voting in America?
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, so inherently, we know that like there's systemic racism, and its biggest factor is that
Well,
it
no, I'm not going
pushes
to
people.
agree that there is systemic racism in the way.
That-
because
that's
there's a
okay.
lot-
You don't
very
have to
loaded
agree.
term, right? So there's a
Okay, you
lot
don't
of
have to
people that
agree.
buy
We're
that.
just going to go by the reality. And the reality is that there is definitely been pressure on people of color throughout American history. And,
Absolutely.
and that has led to financial disparity in America. So therefore, people who are predominantly of lower wealth are those of color. So people who are of color cannot vote as easy as white people.
Well, you say
Right.
therefore, but there can be multiple reasons why that is occurring. But continue.
No, that's literally it. That
Oh, so
they can't
it's
vote.
only
One of those
environmental
reasons.
pressure from
It's not the only reason.
Well,
But it's a
that's
very
like-
big contributor.
Yeah, that's the biggest one that I'm trying to make.
Again,
Okay.
all you have to do is go get a fucking ID and vote.
But that point, you just agreed that it's
We
hard
restarted the
for-
dialogue.
I don't care that. I don't care that it's harder. Some people own cars and they don't own cars. Therefore, it's easier for them to get around town if they have cars. That doesn't mean that we need laws giving everybody cars.
We should.
Well, that's stupid.
I don't agree with giving everybody cars.
Some people live in cities.
Ferraris, houses. Everyone should get a house too, actually,
Mm,
and food.
Stardust.
I kind of wanted to go back to the whole same-day voter registration. We already check these things after people have cast their votes.
Why are you going back there?
Because I didn't get like a response from you.
You got so many responses. It's dominated the conversation.
I didn't get a response. I didn't get a response from the person I wanted. All I wanted was a response from you, Fabio. Okay, I didn't want it from anybody else. Yeah. Okay.
What do you want? What do you want to know?
What do you say to that?
To what?
We already do. What I said.
That some states already have same-day registration.
No, that some places we already check these things, these inconsistencies you're talking about after votes are cast.
Okay.
So why do we need a waiting period?
I never said that we needed a waiting period. I said that the federal government shouldn't be stepping in and instituting a lack of a waiting period because it's the purview of the states to handle this. And that there are different places in America, and some places need a waiting period as they have seen fit, and some places don't.
Well, if the federal government
people have the resources to do it, and some people don't have the resources.
Yes. Okay, sure. If the federal government, though, is getting involved, and let's say they provide funding to assist in this, what's the problem?
Well, taxes are theft, first and foremost.
That's communism.
Of course. Of course.
So right off the bat there, that's one problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, okay. Then I guess the next thing I think we're just going to have to disagree on the taxes or theft part, but I appreciate where you're coming from there. I can see where you're coming from. The second thing I would say is that I don't understand if we require IDs across the board. And I mean, I'm fine with IDs. I just don't see if people are able to present IDs, why there needs to be a waiting period. And then another thing I would say is that
I feel like that's been beat to death.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I just wanted to say it anyways, whether it's been beat to death or not. Okay, Fabio? I feel like saying the things I want to say. So, then the next thing I would say is that I think you have a very strong aversion to certain words. And one of those words is anything that has to do with racism. And when people say systemic racism or disparate outcomes, things like that, I don't think anybody's calling a certain person racist, right? We're just saying that the outcomes of something disproportionately affect a certain group, and that is a racist outcome. Do you understand that much?
Oh, I'm fully well versed in sociological theory and critical theory and all of these things. I have an aversion to certain words because people use these words and they have no understanding of the Marxist materialist dialectics that they're sneaking in. They have no understanding of the history of the critical theory. They have no understanding of how these words are coached and caged in so many bad philosophical ideas that are destructive for society.
Look, I don't give a fuck about Marxist,
I have an aversion to certain words.
I understand that, but I don't give a fuck about Marx. Because
Marx.
She
brought it up, so I'm explaining why.
I understand what you're saying. I really don't give a fuck about Marx. If I remember correctly, Marx said some weird shit about Jewish people. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that. But anyways,
right, but you use language that's coached in his philosophy.
Okay, but there's language coached in everybody's philosophy, and there are plenty of people who are shitty people.
Yeah, weren't you the person that said before that no ideas are unique, they're all derivatives?
That you had to rely on Dilbert's moderation?
Okay.
It's Carter.
Weren't you the person before that said that all ideas
when you
are like
do this, you
derivatives?
distract from me, okay? That okay, you're distracting from me being the center of attention right now, okay?
I don't understand. Why did he do it again? Okay, so we're going to throw it over to Taft for the last speaker of the night, I believe. Unless, Ty, did you raise your hand?
No.
Okay, Taft.
Before closing statements. Yeah, sounds good. I mean, in regards to what FL Scott is saying, I think what he's getting at is this sort of problem that if you have a law which is applied equally across racial groups, but has a disparate impact on one or another, the bar that we not allow any law which might have disproportionate outcomes but is applied equally, the requirement that we don't allow those kind of laws on the basis that they're racist is it's a scary law, or it's a scary bar to put on things. And it sort of reminds me of some of Ibram X. Kendi's work. Ibram X. Kendi makes the argument that if you have any law which is applied equally across the board, at the very least, it's going to be reinforcing the status quo, right? So if you give money to everyone equally, then it's not helping, because what we really need to be doing is disproportionately benefiting Black people over white people. And that's the only way that we're going to reverse, the centuries of discrimination and income inequality and so on. That's Ibram X. Kendi's argument, right? And I think that's legitimately a dangerous argument, because it introduces a kind of systemic bias towards Black people or towards minorities in general, which is totally blind to the reasons why these sort of inequalities might exist in the first place. So I think this is sort of legitimate in a broader philosophical sense. But in this specific instance, I am going to critique F.L. Scott a little bit. I will say that it does seem legitimate to probably allow these felons to vote, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad policy.
So you don't got to dig at me. I'm for giving felons the right to vote.
Okay, yeah, it does seem like a legitimate policy, and it does happen to disproportionately benefit Black and minority people.
Okay, we're now going to wrap up. We're going to do outro statements and also shout outs at this time, where you can shout out all your stuff. We're going to start in the bottom right-hand corner so I can keep Carter away from his bed for the longest period of time. Tiberius.
All right, so just to wrap up my general thoughts on this particular topic, we can do voting IDs like a pain in the ass, or we can do them very easily. There is a few precautions that FLS brought up that I think are a little bit of concerns. It does seem like we might be making voting a little too easy, but that's more of an intuitive argument, and if you need data, well, then I guess we'll have to wait for the thing to pass before you get the data. My whole thing is that this isn't hard to do right, and this is actually the thing kind of pisses me off about the Republican Party. You want to take election security seriously? Great, wonderful, 100% behind you. But make sure people actually have the right to vote. Otherwise, it makes you look like a little bitch, like you're walking out of the conversation. It's not okay. People have the right to vote, and they should be, exercise that right to vote. That's why we have a democracy. Democratic Republic, by the way. But anyway, the whole thing here is that if you are interested in anything I had to say, you want to know more, Tiberius D on Twitch and YouTube. I host the Mascot Podcast. I talk geopolitics. I like to review sci-fi. Any of that seems really cool for you, come check me out. Appreciate you having me.
Okay, I'm going to throw it now over to Taft.
Great. I don't think that voter fraud or election fraud is something that is a serious systemic problem. So I don't think that it's, I don't think that voter ID laws are super necessary or need to be protected or allowed to be implemented in their strictest form. In regards to sort of closing out on this topic, I do think that this act is probably all right overall, though I say that I haven't read through every piece of it. So maybe there's some really strong argument for some hidden part that is going to be super disastrous. And I think that I would just need to research more in regards to that. But, on first blush and hearing the arguments presented here, I do think that if the bill does exist in the way that, its proponents are presenting it, it seems like an all right bill.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Star.
Yeah. I think I've said everything I can say, and it's not really worth it for me to go over my thoughts on this, except, I think I just think that expanding the ability to vote for a lot of people is great. And if states get more funding through that, then that's great. But yeah, that's pretty much all I'm going to say. I'm Stardust. You can find me on twitch.tv/Stardust. I stream every day, 7 days a week. At least 7 hours. So I haven't taken a break in months. So, yeah, check me out. I'm here. I meme and I do serious stuff as well. So, yeah.
I agree. Stardust streams too much. Rose?
Yeah, so final, opinions on this topic. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Voting is super important. We need a real good excuse if we're going to put any forms of barriers in front of there. Now, obviously, you can have arguments about what the best way to put the barriers and whether there are maybe some auxiliary benefits to it, but far beyond anything that was discussed right now on this panel, I would say. Now, on to the more important thing, okay? This is my first appearance on the Hippy Dippy Roundtable, okay? And I've really shaken it up. CTV got really riled up. This person, they're supposed to be the challenger for the title, for the belt, and they get rattled over some Swedish teenager who's debating for the first time at 4 a.m. I don't know how good this champion is. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. Even Dylan had to nerf me 3 times, 4 times, just got muted for no reason. It's really sad. But yeah, overall, my name is Rose Wrist. Thank you for having me on, Dylan, even though I just kind of said that. Forget about that. Whoops. And yeah, find me Rose Wrist on Twitch, on YouTube. And I upload videos almost every day, and I stream twice a week because, yeah, I'm busy. I have other stuff to do as well.
Rose, I appreciate you staying up so much past your bedtime. Tell your parents that I apologize. I'm going to throw it over to James.
As always, Dylan, Danabo, the whole team, I appreciate you having me. At least, you always know you're going to have one angry leftist when you holler. Bottom line, unless we have a very simple, extremely free national system where literally everybody can get an ID on demand, no questions asked, essentially what you're talking about is jumping through hoops or initiating a poll tax. And the last I heard, people who founded this country weren't really big on either of those things. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a leftist who hates the Constitution. So if you want to enjoy actual base takes that, aren't attached to something shrouded in black and gold, y'all can come by, holler at me, James from the internet here on Twitch. I tell you to follow me on Twitter, but I already got banned for life for, saying mean things about Tommy Lahren. So come by, say hi, and much love, everybody. I appreciate you. Cheers.
What did you say about Tommy? What did you say about her?
I may or may not have called her the 6th generation anchor baby of an undocumented Russian immigrant.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Fabian.
Yeah, so in summation, there are provisions of this bill that I agree with, but I can obviously not support this bill for some of the things that we disagree with. Some of the issues that you saw on the panel, but also all of the things that I mentioned that everyone conveniently kind of pivoted away from and acted like I didn't say because they're actual really serious issues like, the EAC getting power or, not being able to have, chain of custody, making it to where you can have private companies or other people hired so that we can do better secure audits, or the fact that gerrymandering is going to be moved to the DC district court, making it essentially a leftist haven for deciding whether or not gerrymandering is occurring and things like that. The things that they know are issues, but they only want to talk about the things that they think they can hammer me on that they support in this bill instead of having an honest, good faith conversation. But what can you expect from lefties? I will say this, however, I just want to add one additional one so that we can, just one additional thing is in Section H, they have a prohibition on restrictions on the donation of food, right? And when you read that, you're like, oh my God, of course we need that. And then you realize this is one of the many poison pills in the bill because many Republican legislators instituted a 50-foot ban from giving out food and water in the voting lines. You had to be 50 feet away from the polling location because Democrat and left-wing organizations were coming in and handing out pamphlets and telling people who they needed to vote for, and were doing so under the auspices of giving out food and water, almost constituting bribing people for votes. But Democrats got to make sure they're able to do that. I will say I had a great time. Rose Wrist, if you're not happy with CTV as a champion, I guess you just don't understand the memes here on Twitch, and you'll eventually get it. It's part and parcel of blood sports, and I'm coming right on your heels, motherfucker. Love you very much. It's Fabian Liberty on Twitch and YouTube, but honestly, I think Discord is probably the best place for what we do. It's much better than everything else. So join the Discord.
For everybody restreaming this, you can find me at twitch.tv/Hasanabi. I'm throwing it now over to CTV for his outro.
Yeah, so I think it's obvious what we saw tonight, right? We saw somebody make a declarative statement and then choose to hide behind the very thing that they were accusing somebody else of. Right? So because of that, the only thing that can be said is this generation clearly loves their participation trophies and they got to shout themselves out, right? Because they got one. I don't give a fuck about you, dude. The last time I talked to you, you were a disingenuous fuck. You're a disingenuous fuck now, and I don't give two flies of a fuck about you, which is why you're not a part of my community. Got that? Okay, cool. So that being said, I felt like it was a good conversation with everybody tonight. I felt like we got a lot of good memes, and until someone decided that they were going to, create this whole situation where CTV was going to have to overtalk them so that they can then cry back to the moderator, which they did, and Dylan gleefully fucking fell for it. It makes me question whether or not this man is actually the fucking leader, right, of the multi-million-dollar cyber terrorist organizing fucking gun smuggling organization that I've been a part of for this last year, or if this is just somehow, some way, a way to be able to give these poor little lefties, right, the fucking thing they're looking for, right? That's all I fucking know, right? So
Dylan oppressed me.
beyond that, you can fucking find me at twitch.tv/critically thinking veteran. I'm sitting over here on Wednesday nights. We host Marvel Me with your bullshit or Be Disconnected. Thursday nights is Halo night. We're going to be fucking getting down with the tournaments, and Friday nights we're typically going around to all of the various politics communities and debating these very things. You might have saw the debate that I had this earlier with VPF where I made him rage quit. You might have seen that. It's pretty funny if you haven't. So not only am I owning the left wing, I'm owning the right wing, and that's specifically Fabian, right? It's why everyone else is in the chase for the runnings for the hippy dippie championship belt. And Destiny, in case you were fucking wondering if you've been forgotten about, bro, you've been in Florida this whole fucking time. You've been doing nothing but ducking and dodging, right? The fact of the matter is, I'm still fucking here. I'm still waiting for your bitch ass to go ahead and get ready for the fucking title match. That way we can go ahead and get it down, right, to when it's going to be, right? And then what the topic's going to be around, because it's changed a few different fucking times. Not only the topic, but the fucking time and place, right? Let me know when you're through fucking ducking so that we can get this shit done, because it's not only just me, right? But the fans want to see it too. That right there is the fact of the matter, right? And the fact of the matter is that CTV's the people's champ. And right now, I'm not even advocating on behalf of myself.
Plus, I have to debate him after you lose.
Fabian.
I have to debate Destiny after he loses. So
the best thing I like about CTV is how he speaks in a third person. That's my favorite thing. Now I'm going to throw it over to Carter to wrap us up for the night.
Yeah, you can follow me at Carter. Yeah, I think that this is just a net positive. I think getting more people to vote is the best thing. I don't think it'll pass. I'll be honest. It's obviously just like a thing to look like the progressive Democratic Party, but they're not. Like I said earlier, there's no progress. It's just all show. And that's it. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. Is this what you expected?
Yeah, it was fine. Yeah, I had fun. It's way past my old man bedtime. I go to bed like 3 hours ago.
Me too. Yeah.
I understand. What are you, like 23? Like, that's so old.
Dude, I'm 26. So
wow.
Yeah, I know.
Did the Alzheimer's kick in yet, or like how's
it? It is actually. When I'm watching CTV over here, I just immediately think, God, I can't wait to be with this guy at his retirement home. I can't believe they let you do your room up like that there. Is that standard?
Oh, yeah. For those that are able to be in 43-foot 5-slide travel trailers, they can travel the country whenever they fucking choose at a moment's notice, because the reality is that whenever any of the conservative arguments
the dementia's setting in early. Okay.
Whenever any of the conservative arguments come down to, fuck it, if you don't like it, you can move. I live by the philosophy. So I challenge any other conservative out there on the plane, right, to live by the very fucking values that I fucking live by every fucking day. That's what I'm talking about.
You do live by your values like CTV does, Carter?
Oh, of course. You know what I do? My value, I give away everything. I have no house, no car. I do have an iPhone, so I'm a fake leftist. There's a fake, but I don't have a house. I don't have a car. I'm in debt.
There you go. You're kicked out. Go hang out with CTV. You have an iPhone.
There we go. Yeah, I can be a true leftist. I'll just give rid of my
iPhone. I got an Android only. I don't like the proprietary software that they try to control your fucking media. Okay. That's right. That's
just for the record.
I would just like to reiterate that Stardust, the POC woman, has been oppressed the entire time by Dylan and his cyber
That's crazy. Anyway, you guys have a great night.
Unbelievable.
Real quick.
Yeah, Fabian, say it. Yeah.
Motorola.
Good, great. You all have a nice night.
Let's
I love you
go.
all. See you guys in Dallas, Texas this weekend for the convention. See you all there. I'll be there. Carter said, he DM'd me, he said he's going to pay for the $500 VIP tickets. He's going to be there with me. We're tag team debating Destiny and Boris Johnson on incest. It's going to be a great night. You all have a good one. See you guys next week for the next Hippy Dippy. Thank you all for coming.
Good night.
Peace.
All right.
Crazy stuff, boys. What was my favorite meme? God, I don't know. I'm like exhausted though. It was that was a lot for sure. I think I was much more active early on talking to people, but I just didn't have the energy to like really dig in with everyone. There's a Kano boy and Bastia in chat. Incredible. A meeting of the minds. Progressives haven't done anything was a good meme for sure. I was like so mind boggled by that claim. I think it was cool though. I talked with a bunch of panelists. I'm probably gonna talk with Rose Rest for a little bit, but I don't know. I don't think I'll stream it because I'm like, I just want to be more chill. That was fun though. I'll definitely probably do more of that stuff just because I want to keep being involved. Chat distracted me so much. I enjoyed messaging people in chat. And just like spamming and like doing random faces. It was fun. But yeah, I'm probably gonna do a short talk with Rose Wrist now. So I'm gonna end the stream and just do that off stream. I talked with Stephen Bennell, Destiny, a little bit ago. And then I did a talk with Calvin Guerra and Synth and some other trans people. So I've done a few chats now. So yeah, good stuff. More intellectual. That's a good thing. Yeah. I try to be thoughtful. But yeah, good stuff. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining me.